I can make you very special.
Hundreds of years ago, people completely exhausted the planet's resources, leading to a total degradation of the population. The best scientists took it upon themselves to save the dying world. A renewable energy source was found. However, the greatest danger remained humanity itself. Differences led to divisions between the best and the worst. It was then decided to improve humans as a species. On their 16th birthday, everyone undergoes a procedure that makes them physically perfect. No longer does anyone need to envy others or prove their superiority. Tally is one of those waiting for that day. For now, she is called an ugly, but she has the opportunity to see what she will look like, as she can choose her eye color or skin quality. That evening, she sneaks onto a bridge where her friend Paris is waiting for her. They watch a party in the City of the Beautiful, envying those who are already there. Paris is 3 months older than Tally, and tomorrow he will undergo the operation and move to the city. Tally will have to wait her turn, and she fears that Paris will forget about her. But he assures her that she will always be his squints, and he will always be her nose. He arranges to meet her in a month. The next day, the students gather in the main hall to greet those whose time has come. Dr. Cable talks about all the advantages of being beautiful and calls forward the future beauties. Paris says goodbye to Tally, and a girl named Shay, sitting next to her, notices this. In the evening, Tally returns to her room and remembers how she and Paris met when they arrived at school. He called himself Nose and she called herself Squints. One day the boy hurt his hand and the girl intentionally cut her palm. From that moment on, they shared a mark of ugliness, a scar on their palms, and the belief that they were perfect for each other. The next morning in class, Tally talks about the white tiger orchid, which supplies energy to the cities and decorates the fields. That evening, she undergoes the mandatory scan for her future transformation, where she chooses gold for her eye color and dreams of reuniting with Paris, from whom there has been no news. The day of the arranged meeting arrives. The girl sneaks onto the bridge, but Nose is not there. Tally decides to sneak into the City of Joy. She reaches the outskirts, where a party is in full swing. Suddenly, a mask falls from above, allowing its owner to change their clothing. Tally puts it on, selects a dress, and heads out to search for her friend in streets filled with lights, laughter, music, and celebration. Miraculously, she finds Paris, who barely recognizes her. Even the scar on his hand is gone, though he swore he wouldn't remove it. It turns out that after the transformation, an ugly person's life becomes entirely different, where an eternal friendship oath no longer matters. Tally removes the mask to remind him of herself, but immediately becomes an unwanted presence. She runs, grabbing a rescue vest on her way. Realizing she is about to be caught, Tally jumps from a skyscraper. The vest saves her, and she manages to reach the bridge, but she is pursued, and just as she is about to be caught, Shay arrives to rescue her on her hoverboard. The girls immediately feel a kindred spirit. Tally shows Shay how to sneak into the locked kitchen and tells her that her meeting with Paris left her disappointed. One day, Shay suggests that Tally learn to ride the hoverboard and gives her a forbidden book to read. Tally learns that Shay told her friends about her jump with the rescue vest, and now she is the heroine of the entire campus, which could lead to her being denied the operation. But she continues with her lessons and masters the hoverboard. Later, the girls discuss beauty, and unexpectedly, Shay reveals that she doesn't want to change at all. For now, she takes Tally to a training ground where, choosing the most difficult track, she puts on a masterclass. After riding, Tally returns the book, in which she enjoyed the free flow of everything in the world, from natural seasons to relationships. Then Shay suggests that they both refuse the operation and escape with her to the smoke, a place where people live freely. She takes her friend to the edge of the school grounds, and after leaving their tracking rings on a branch, the girls fly into the wildlands. Crossing a river, they arrive at the ruins of an old city. Shay shows her the remnants of a roller coaster, lamenting that it is destroyed. She takes her friend to a tall building where they can call her friends from the wild world by lighting a signal fire. Shay explains that in the outside world, people work for themselves, love, and have children. There are even old people there. Everything is like in the book they read. Shay was planning to escape with her friend David when she saw Tally on the bridge and came to her rescue. She wants to read books and have hobbies because after the operation, a person no longer decides how to live. Tally doesn't understand this, as she has dreamed all her life of being beautiful. So Shay leaves her with a coated path to the smoke and departs with David, whose fire lights up on the neighboring rooftop. Tally returns to the city, where the day of her transformation soon arrives. Unexpectedly, instead of the operation, she is taken to Dr. Cable, who turns out to be well aware of her friendship with the missing Shay. She insists that David is holding Shay against her will, brainwashing her. and only after Tally finds Shay and returns her to the city will she be allowed to become beautiful. A distressed Tally returns to her room, where Paris visits her. He advises her to do as Dr. Cable asks, as it is the only way they can be together. Tally agrees. Dr. Cable explains that the residents of the Smoke are planning to destroy the city and have developed a weapon that Tally must find and neutralize. She sets off, receiving a pendant to activate when she finds the weapon. Tally follows Shay's instructions and after reaching the ruined roller coaster, rides it until she reaches an old railroad track. She camps in the forest for the night, lighting a fire, and unexpectedly finds charm in the surrounding nature. Later, she has to climb a steep cliff and cross the ruins on her hoverboard. The last stop is a white sea of orchids, where Tally settles in for the night. Meanwhile, Dr. Cable calls Paris and offers to further enhance him. That night, Tally wakes up surrounded by burning orchids. As she is about to lose consciousness, David finds her. He checks her over, discards the transmitters he finds, ignoring the pendant, which is not yet active, and takes her with him. However, the tracker informs Dr. Cable that Tally is in the right place. In the morning, David brings Tally to the Smoke, where she reunites with Shay. However, the others find it strange that she managed to get there alone. Tally expresses her concern for Shay and believes she should return, but Shay has no intention of doing so and asks Tally to take a closer look at this way of life. The next day, Tally comes across a group of young people preparing for an expedition. It turns out that the fires are set by them because the orchids are toxic and drain nutrients from the soil, killing the planet. David offers her to join them and see the truth. The group flies on a mission aboard an ancient modified helicopter. From above, they see fields and forests destroyed by the orchids. Shay sets the plants on fire and a blaze erupts, suddenly revealing figures of people walking through the fire unharmed. Suddenly, the helicopter shakes and Shay falls down. Tally immediately jumps after her. She finds her friend and grabs her just as she sees a figure in a blue suit running towards them. But Tally grabs onto a rope thrown down from the helicopter and the two girls are pulled out of danger. Later, they discuss what happened, confused about how the city's scouts found them. Tally feels guilty and torn, as after getting to know the inhabitants of the Smoke better, she has started to think differently. Here, everyone works but doesn't use money, they just trade. The elderly aren't a burden because they contribute in their own way. Most importantly, the people have chosen to be here. They melt down old iron and make useful things. When Tally asks about weapons, Shay simply shrugs, saying, "Why would we need them?" Tally joins in the work, and even though it's hard, she enjoys the process. In the evening, everyone gathers around the campfires, where she is treated to natural foods. David tells the people that scouts have been spotted, meaning the city hasn't stopped pursuing them. While the Smoke believes in controlling nature, the city has perfected controlling people. By focusing on appearance, people stop reading, learning, dreaming, and choosing who they want to become. That's why they are ready to defend their freedom. The next day, David teaches Tally how to shoot a bow, noticing the calluses on her hands, and gives her his gloves as a gift. At that moment, the flamethrowers arrive, having encountered scouts again. However, these are not typical beauties, but very fast and strong guys. Later, Shay notices the gloves and explains that in this world, things are different from the city. If a guy cares for a girl, it means she's important to him, so Tally has to make a choice. One day, Tally asks David about the weapons. He takes her to his parents. They reveal that they used to be plastic surgeons. It turns out these operations are not as safe as people believe. There were even fatalities. While studying these cases, David's father noticed changes in the brain of the beautiful, realizing that after the procedures, people's thinking became clouded and they experienced a false sense of happiness. But only Cable realized the secret was uncovered and they were removed from their work and their research results were confiscated. It became clear that the brain was being intentionally damaged to control people. David's parents were lucky to find themselves in a community of dissenters where they were given a medicine that helped them stay sane. That's why they fled and dedicated the rest of their lives to creating a cure. But one of the main components remained in the city. The serum is the weapon, though it's not yet completed. Once they obtain what's missing, they will need to test it on a person, but only if that person agrees. That night, Tally reflects on everything she's learned, takes off the pendant, and throws it into the fire, not realizing that by doing so, she activates it. She tells David what happened, but he reassures her that she has chosen the right path. He tells her she is beautiful and kisses her. The next morning, the city attacks the Smoke. Men in blue suits trap the residents of the Smoke in nets and gather them in the square. Tally holds back David, and they watch the events unfold from a distance. Cable interrogates David's parents, and when she gets no answers, she orders Paris to kill David's father. He reaches out and with one swift movement, snaps the man's neck. David rushes out, and together with his mother, they cry over his father's body. Paris sees Tally but doesn't touch her, while Cable thanks her for her cooperation, revealing her true mission. As Shay expresses her disgust towards her, David's mother secretly slips a vial of the medicine into her son's pocket. Tally breaks free, runs to David's house, and sets it on fire. In the chaos, David escapes into the forest. Tally, shooting her pursuer with a bow, also runs while the townspeople burn down the settlement and take its residents away. Later, Tally finds David and tells him that she didn't know the whole truth, and the residents of the smoke paid the price. She is ready to help him get to the city and fix her mistake. She takes him to the school, introduces him to Shay's friends, and asks them for help. The young people start a rebellion, writing the words "Smoke Forever" above the city, diverting attention from the main goal. Taking advantage of this, Tally and David sneak into the laboratory, but to access the right level, the school ring is not enough. David takes it from a guard, and the pair find and free the residents of the smoke, but Shay has already been taken for the operation. Tally, David, and his mother rush after her, but it's too late. Shay has been turned into a beauty, and she really likes it. At that moment, Paris and Dr. Cable enter the laboratory, urging people to finally make a choice. All three step into the transformation booths, but just as the process begins, a helicopter flies overhead, and David's friend uses a flamethrower to melt the outer glass. The system collapses, Tally pulls Shay out, and while David's mother finds the necessary component for the medicine, they escape. The group makes it to the roof, where they are stopped by Paris. Tally tries to remind him of their friendship, but he reaches out, and David, remembering his father's death, attacks the handsome man. After a struggle, Paris dangles over a waterway, and at the last moment, he recognizes Tally, but he slips and falls down. David leads Tally away. Later, the group gathers in the ruins of the ancient city. David's mother shows them the retrieve component and pulls the vial from her son's pocket. The medicine is finally ready, but Shay refuses to be the test subject, as she loves being beautiful. So Tally volunteers to return to the city, undergo the procedure, and then become a volunteer. It's very risky, but she is confident in her strength. Sometime later, the beautiful Tally admires the city and, when asked by the system, assures it that she is completely happy being perfect. The movie raises more questions than it answers. The city's motivation is unclear, as the beauties produce nothing but self-admiration, and the danger posed by the smoke isn't fully explained, but the visuals allow viewers to simply enjoy the beautiful scenes, forgetting about the absurdities of the plot. The spaceship is on a mission to Titan, one of Saturn's moons. Astronaut John wakes up in the hibernation capsule. He feels weak after the long sleep. The drugs have many side effects, and John needs some time to recover. He is greeted by the ship's captain, Franks. The captain orders John to take a shower and then come up to the bridge to discuss the next steps. Besides Captain Franks, John is met by his colleague Nash. Together, the men watch a message from the Mission Control Center and receive new instructions. They are to conduct routine equipment checks and prepare for gravitational acceleration. John tries to pull himself together, but this time he feels worse. He struggles to eat and confesses to Nash that he can't remember the last name of Zoe, his girlfriend. By evening, John manages to check all the equipment. He records a response message to Mission Control, reports the situation, and prepares for another hibernation cycle, which will last 3 more months. A special substance is injected into the astronaut's bloodstream, and his eyes slowly close. Memories from the past wash over him, and for the next 3 months, he is deep in sleep. The awakening process is routine, with John experiencing the usual symptoms as he waits for his body to recover. After a hearty meal, the astronaut spends some time on the exercise bike, preparing for work, but unexpectedly he hears a familiar voice. It seems like Zoe's voice came from somewhere nearby. John steps into the corridor and walks through the empty spaceship. No one else has woken up from deep sleep yet, and John feels uneasy. His fear intensifies when part of the ship's hull above him starts to come loose. John tries to figure out what's wrong, but a piece of metal breaks off and knocks him unconscious. Captain Franks and Nash lay their injured colleague down and provide medical assistance. As soon as John feels better, the captain orders him to go to the technical compartment and figure out what caused the malfunction. Under the hull, John finds significant damage and a strange giant dent, but the footage Nash reviews from the cameras provides no answers. No objects approached the ship in the past few hours. Moreover, the dent hasn't caused any serious problems. All systems are still functioning normally. Captain Franks leaves his subordinates and orders them to report the situation to Earth. He himself heads to the site of the damage for another inspection. Nash tries to convince the captain to abort the mission and return to Earth, but Franks refuses to break protocol. There's no serious reason to do so, as all systems are still operating smoothly. The astronauts gather to make a joint decision, but the conflict only escalates. Nash starts panicking, insisting that continuing the mission is too dangerous, but the captain remains firm. Unless new orders come from Mission Control, they will continue toward Titan. Nash then tries to persuade John to act together. He's convinced the system will eventually fail, and by then, they won't have the chance to save themselves and return to Earth. Their conversation is interrupted by the captain, who calls them to the bridge. He admits that he overheard everything Nash said and doesn't appreciate his attempts to stir up panic. Franks tries to calm Nash down, reminding him of the consequences they'll face for disobeying orders and advising them to focus on their duties. Despite the captain's orders, Nash continues to urge John. He asks him to set the hibernation cycle for 89 days instead of 90 so they can wake up earlier than the captain and reverse course back to Earth. John doesn't like his friend's idea and doesn't want to be part of a mutiny, but when Nash tells him about another ship destroyed by poor leadership decisions, John agrees to think it over and give an answer after they wake up. John falls asleep again, recalling happy moments with Zoe, but this time the cycle is much shorter than usual. Nash demands an answer from his friend so they can quickly turn the ship around and head for Earth, but John remains uncertain. He realizes that his mind is clouded, and making important decisions in this state isn't wise. Jupiter appears outside the window, strengthening John's doubts. They are so close to their destination. This drives Nash over the edge, and a loud argument breaks out between the men. Captain Franks watches the whole scene. Having learned of his subordinates' plans, he also altered his sleep schedule and woke up earlier to prevent the mutineers from disrupting the mission. Franks sends Nash to check the systems again to make sure everything is in order. While the saboteur is gone, the captain invites John for a drink to gauge the astronaut's mood. The commander assures John that he'll cancel the mission if it's necessary, but for now they must stick together and follow orders. Nash's derailed plans push him to the brink of insanity. He causes a scene and Franks decides to relieve him of his duties and proceed with acceleration without him. John tries to stay out of the conflict and pretends that everything is fine, but the breach in the hull continues to trouble him, and he often has nightmares where it pulls him into the vacuum of space. Despite his concerns, John ignores Nash's pleas and heads to the bridge to prepare for the acceleration. The team gets ready to approach Jupiter. John sets the coordinates and sequentially activates the powerful engines that will take them to Titan. The acceleration is successful, and the ship enters the orbit that will guide them to Titan. But Nash still believes it's a serious mistake. John isn't entirely sure they made the right choice either, but he tries to keep himself busy to avoid dwelling on it. He decides to check the equipment again, and something strange happens. One of the radios transmits an unknown signal. The crew tries to come up with an explanation, both insisting that John must have accidentally pressed a button. To end the discussion, Franks orders the astronauts to prepare for another hibernation cycle. This time, exiting hibernation becomes a real challenge. John collapses to the floor, completely drained. He tries to recover, but while his body regains strength, his mind suffers greatly. He keeps seeing visions of Zoe everywhere. Captain Franks notices his subordinate's strange condition. He tells John to get a grip and realize that it's all just his imagination. Zoe is not, and cannot be, on the ship. Nash discovers the first signs of trouble. The reactor's power output begins to rise. He's not sure if it's connected to the hull breach, but if it continues, the ship's engine might fail. Nash again urges his friend to listen to him and turn the ship around. He reminds John of Zoe, saying that if they don't return now, she'll quickly find a new boyfriend. Captain Franks overhears the men's conversation once again. He summons them to the bridge for a serious talk. Someone, using Nash's password, deliberately lowered the engine's power to stop the ship. The commander won't tolerate Nash's antics any longer. This time he draws his sidearm to show the mutineer who's in charge on the ship. Franks orders the astronauts to return to their hibernation capsules to prevent any further sabotage. But as John's body starts receiving the drug, he sees what the captain is doing to his colleague. He doesn't have time to stop the crime. His eyes close. Weeks later, when the sleep cycle ends, John tries to figure out if it really happened or if it was just a dream. He steps into the corridor, but none of his colleagues are around. Franks appears suddenly. He assures John that Nash is fine but will remain in hibernation until the mission is over. The captain asks John not to complicate things and behave normally. They need to complete the mission and reach Titan, but if necessary, he'll use his sidearm to prevent further insubordination. To help John relax, Franks tells him the truth about the other ships Nash mentioned. He swears the madman distorted the facts, and in that case the captain wasn't at fault. The crew harmed themselves. John reluctantly admits he was wrong and agrees to continue working together. The captain tasks him with inspecting the equipment and re-establishing contact with mission control on Earth. While working, John's arm goes numb, and he tries to examine it himself, but for a moment it seems like the limb swells and turns into a monstrous hand. As soon as the vision disappears, John hears Zoe's voice again, but he realizes this is also a hallucination and doesn't respond to the call. Instead, John decides to discuss the future plans with the captain, but Franks unexpectedly starts talking about John's relationship with his girlfriend. The commander assures him that their romance wasn't real. It was orchestrated to convince John to join the mission. The unpleasant conversation unsettles John, and he heads to the workshop to focus on his tasks. Unpleasant thoughts and memories prevent John from concentrating, but suddenly the radio crackles, and he hears the dispatcher's voice. The astronaut tries to report what's happening, but the connection keeps cutting out, and he can't hear a response. Franks summons John to the bridge. He demands to know what John was doing, and upon hearing about the conversation with Houston, the captain insists it was another hallucination. The captain orders John to return to his capsule and go back to sleep, but this time John's nerves snap. He demands that Franks wake Nash up and prove that his friend is okay. Taking advantage of a moment, Franks attacks John and tries to force him into the capsule, but John manages to break free. A fight breaks out between the two men. John is stronger, but he can't win the battle with his mind as easily as with the captain. John reaches the central computer to find out which chamber Nash is in and if he's alive. While entering the request, he has to fend off Franks, but finally, the computer starts searching for the astronaut. The answer John receives leaves him in shock. The program confirms that Nash is alive and on the bridge, just like John and Franks, because all three names belong to the same person, Captain John Franks Nash. John realizes that he's been alone on the ship the entire time. His companions were figments of his imagination caused by the repeated use of hibernation drugs. John loses his last bit of strength and doesn't know what to do next. He returns to the workshop, holding the service pistol. The astronaut tries to contact mission control again, but for a long time the radios remain silent. Finally, one of the radios turns on, and John hears Zoe's voice. She says she's at the ground control center and was invited to speak to him. Zoe confirms John's version. The hibernation drugs were too strong, causing his mind to become confused. But that's not the worst part. The girl tells the astronaut that there's no spaceship. All this time he's been part of a different experiment in deep underground. The planets and stars he saw through the window were just a simulation, as was the sensation of flying. But the impact was real. An earthquake hit the surface, partially collapsing the tunnel. Zoe asks her fiancé to gather his strength and help them rescue him. To do that, John needs to depressurize the cargo bay and leave the ship. She assures him that outside, there's an underground corridor leading to the surface. Captain Franks reappears behind John, trying to stop him. He claims that Zoe's voice is just another hallucination, and the story about underground tunnels and earthquakes is a fantasy his mind made up to explain the situation. Franks tells John that if he depressurizes the cargo bay, all that awaits outside is the vacuum of space, which will pull him out and end his life. John hesitates briefly, but Zoe's voice gives him strength. He doesn't listen to the captain and opens the airlock. At first it seems like Zoe was right. John finds himself in a shaft and hears her voice nearby. He walks toward the light, hoping to soon reach the surface, but space engulfs the astronaut's body and carries him into the infinite void. Or was that a hallucination too? That's how the movie ends. Mid-21st century, after conquering the moon, people desired more, and Mars became the new goal. The first ever manned flight to the Red Planet is underway, led by experienced astronaut Alexander Shapaev. Although the flight itself is successful, upon entering Mars's atmosphere, the landing module is hit by a meteor shower, causing it to encounter a sandstorm. Back on Earth, the head of Central Flight Control, Kovalev, orders Shapaev to take manual control of the module, but this fails fails to rectify the critical situation. Then, Kovalev commands the activation of the return program and the detachment of the small module from the main ship. However, the equipment fails. Shapaev manually detaches the module, saving the main crew. His colleagues can now return to Earth, but this astronaut cannot. Kovalev is deeply affected by the incident, while his interview about the upcoming Mars mission plays on TV, not foreseeing the tragic outcome. Once, Kovalev and Shapaev dreamed of flying to the Red Planet, but Kovalev never imagined his best friend paying with his life for it. Now, as the flight director, he must inform the world of the disaster. Kovalev steps out to address the gathered journalists. Meanwhile, on Mars, it turns out that although the module is severely damaged, the astronaut is alive. Shapaev establishes communication just as Kovalev announces the astronaut's death on television and his heroic act of saving the main ship and crew. Upon learning this, Kovalev rushes to the communication screen, overjoyed to see his friend alive and well. Later, he begins calculating rescue options and asks Minister Rogachev to expedite the next expedition, which could save Shapaev. The minister is horrified by the impending costs. At the same time, a popular TV host reports the Mars disaster to the president of the television corporation, suggesting a show about space dogs instead of a hopeless report on the man stranded on Mars. However, the president advises delving into this topic and calls Kovalev to propose creating a show with his astronaut. A live broadcast from another planet is sensational. Kovalev is outraged by his cynicism as a man is left utterly alone millions of kilometers from his home planet with little hope for rescue. But the corporation president explains that all funds raised will go towards rescuing astronaut Shapaev, showing the world that people do not abandon their own. Kovalev retreats to his office, where photos of his military comrades reveal that he and Shapaev once served in the army together and have been friends since childhood. Looking at Shapaev's photo, the director announces the start of preparations for the rescue mission. Kovalev learns that only one module section remains intact. On Mars, Shapaev activates a robot to explore the area around the module, while Kovalev finds out that the module's power, designed for 30 months, will actually only last 13. The rescue expedition can be launched in 190 days, aligning with the phases of Mars and Earth. Similar developments exist in China and America. If agreements are reached with them, the rescue can be achieved within 13 months. But Shapaev must survive on extreme rationing. The center's psychologist Anna is ready to work with the astronaut as much and whenever needed to help him endure the upcoming year. Meanwhile, on Mars, Shapaev's robot detects an unidentifiable movement outside. Anna contacts the astronaut as it's important to know his psychological state, but Shapaev assures her that everything is fine. After talking with Shapaev, the minister announces that the expedition was a success. Since the module is established on the surface, the astronaut is alive and agrees to participate in the reality show. At Central Flight Control, television crews start their activities. Kovalev's protests are dismissed by the television corporation president, reminding him that this is all for the astronaut's rescue. TV host Grisha advises Shapaev to simply listen to him for the show to succeed. And so, the show begins. The TV host introduces the world to the man cast to the edge of the universe, but Shapaev takes the floor and starts simply talking to people, sharing what he has learned about Mars. He does this with a great sense of humor, winning the love of the Earthlings. However, the man struggles with the loneliness on an alien planet. One day, he contacts Earth because he heard strange sounds, but the communication specialist Peter detects nothing unusual, and Shapaev disconnects. During this time on Earth, the TV host again urges the president of the television corporation to abandon the filming, but he then reveals the true nature of the show. Live observation of a man on the brink of life and death. Shapaev quickly becomes first a Russian and then an international celebrity. He is nicknamed the Alien. Videos of his broadcasts about the structure of the universe rapidly gain views on social media, and his live connections draw vast audiences. Children ask their questions, to which the astronaut responds simply and clearly, earning him immense love from viewers. However, some envy the astronaut's fame. Anna's fiancé, Pyotr, starts to feel jealous of Shapaev, with whom she communicates for several hours a day, a fact noted by the TV host. Unexpectedly, the downside of the show becomes apparent, the live broadcasts consume a lot of energy, and Chapayev can only survive under conditions of increased conservation. But the president of the television corp insists on continuing the show, as the more money they earn, the faster they can organize a rescue expedition. Kovalev announces an increase in broadcasts despite Anna's outrage. Meanwhile, on Mars, Chapayev continues to conduct planned experiments and occasionally hears strange sounds, which Pyotr consistently misses. One day, the astronaut begins to suffer from terrible headaches caused by some unknown radiation, but then they suddenly stop, and he hears his mother's voice, which delights him. The next day, he tells young viewers about the universe, space, and Earth. The children listen to him, holding their breath. Suddenly, he confesses that from the very first day on Mars, he felt like he was hearing sounds, as if someone was trying to talk to him, and now he is sure that he is not alone on Mars. This conversation causes alarm at the flight control center. Apparently, Chapayev is starting to hallucinate. The minister demands to find out what is happening with Chapayev. Psychologist Anna requests a private conversation with the astronaut. Chapayev confesses that the sounds he heard seem to express what is inside him, as if he is the cause of everything happening, not the consequence, as if there is no time, no space, not even Mars. It seems the people created this reality and are now trying to understand it. People create universes, planets, harmony, or destroy them, and he feels like he is the cause of everything happening on Mars, and people are the cause of what is happening on Earth. Only on Earth there are many people, and everything is so confused, but on Mars, he is alone. The astronaut is surprised that no one but him hears sounds like a melody, and Anna concludes that these are hallucinations. During the next broadcast, Chapayev suddenly confesses that he feels lost. The TV host has to convince Chapayev that Earthlings are waiting for his return, but suddenly, the astronaut stops talking to Anna. He tries to explain that he encountered something anomalous on Mars, but the flight control center considered him insane. So, Chapayev deemed them insane. Earth was becoming more distant from him. Then, one day, communications specialist Pyotr also catches strange signals. He tries to talk to Anna, but she, upset by the astronaut's behavior and her fiancé's jealousy suspicions, doesn't listen. By the next broadcast, Chapayev does not make contact at the appointed time. Anna tries to call him to talk, but unsuccessfully. Strangely, the president of the television corporation is only pleased by this. He contacts the minister and proposes to discuss the issue of power, as if Chapayev supports Rogachev, he could win the elections and become president. Meanwhile, on Mars, the search robot discovers an unknown, shapeless creature, previously unseen. Back on Earth, Rogachev calls Pyotr and orders him to establish communication with Mars. He has a business proposal that Chapayev cannot refuse. Later, the astronaut goes on air with a rather strange message about life on Mars, showing a toy Martian. Then he agrees to participate in a new show called Chapayev Knows, where he starts giving advice in virtually all spheres of human life. He becomes the most popular person on the planet. Anna realizes that something is wrong, and one day she literally corners her fiancé, demanding he tell her everything he knows, and he confesses that there were indeed some sounds on Mars, but it's impossible to talk to Chapayev because all communication channels are blocked. The astronaut continues to explore Mars with the robot. Meanwhile, on Earth, Kovalev comes to the minister. The money is collected, and it's time to start the rescue expedition. But suddenly, the minister declares that rescue is impossible under any circumstances. Chapayev is a routine loss. The funds raised from the show have disappeared into thin air. The program is winding down, and Kovalev is fired. Meanwhile, Chapayev continues to experience headaches from the unintelligible sounds emitted by an unknown entity attacking the module. At the same time, Kovalev approaches the president of the television corporation for help, and he asks to wait until tomorrow. The next day, the show starts with Chapayev urging Earthlings to vote for Rogachev, who has nominated himself for president. But at the moment when the minister is bowing before the monitors, a special forces group bursts into the television center. The broadcast is interrupted, and everyone sees that it was not Chapayev, but the TV host addressing the people. It turns out that a duplicate of the module was built in one of the television studios, and a computer model of the astronaut was created. The police began an investigation to identify the client of this monstrous scam, asserting that there was no accident on Mars, and thus, no astronaut. Supposedly, the entire story was invented. For the show, Kovalev is in despair. All hope is fallen. He won't be able to save his friend. Meanwhile, Rogachev is arrested. Kovalev breaks into the flight control center as TV reports the death of Chapayev. Kovalev fights with the special forces. A gunshot is heard. At this time, the president of the television corporation contemplates that Chapayev never existed. Never. But the astronaut does exist. A wounded Kovalev reaches the employees of the flight control center and contacts Chapayev on Mars. He apologizes for Earthlings who are only interested in money and power. Kovalev tells his friend that the government decided to tell the world that there was no module, no landing on Mars, and Chapayev died several months ago on Earth while on duty. It was all fiction for the show, but if he could give people a sign, then the connection is cut off. An emergency news broadcast airs. American satellites recorded an explosion on the surface of Mars in the Cupid's Plateau area. All experts affirmed that it was the module of the International Martian Expedition, which is direct evidence that astronaut Chapayev was indeed on Mars. The astronaut, after the explosion of the module, goes into the deserts of Mars and talks about what the unknown Martian entity told him. Chapayev understood that humans inadvertently are the creators of the material universe. Each moment in time is an act of creation of the universe. Humans are creators who come and simultaneously create this material world to understand it. It's like the double-slit experiment in quantum physics, a well-known experiment confirming the immaterial nature of our universe, where elementary particles become matter only when observed. Humans are the cause of all misfortunes and catastrophes in the universe, just as each person individually is the cause of everything happening in their own life on Earth. Therefore, only humans can change this life, the world, and the entire universe, if they can change themselves. Next, we see how Chapayev voluntarily dissolves and merges with the universe, from which each of us appears in this world. A human hand in a black glove injects some substance into the yolk of an egg, and after a few minutes, it divides, producing an identical egg. At the same time, on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, a star for Oscar winner Elizabeth Sparkle is unveiled. Time passes, the star fades, and soon Sparkle's name no longer shines as brightly. She herself now hosts an aerobics TV show. Despite her age, the woman is fit and looks quite good. However, one day she goes to the restroom, and seeing that the women's restroom is out of order, she enters the men's room. Inside a stall, she hears the voice of the show's producer, Harvey, saying that Elizabeth is outdated and the show needs a young and hot girl. It's time for Sparkle to retire. After all, her Oscar was won at the dawn of cinematography, and it's time to make way for the younger generation. Upset, Elizabeth goes to lunch with the producer, where he laughingly announces her retirement and leaves with a friend. The woman sees a fly in her wine glass and feels just as helpless. On her way home, the actress gets distracted by workers taking down her billboard, and she gets into an accident. In the hospital, the doctor recognizes the star and compliments her, but the woman starts crying because all her fame is now behind her. Embarrassed, the doctor says goodbye and leaves. However, a young nurse suddenly starts examining Elizabeth's back, muttering that she is perfect for an experiment. Before leaving, he slips a flash drive into her pocket with a commercial for a product called Substance. Elizabeth reads the name of the product when an older man calls out to her. It turns out to be her old classmate, Fred. He is happy to see her and offers to meet and reminisce about their youth. Fred writes his phone number on a random scrap of paper, and after soaking it in a puddle, he hands it to Elizabeth, who pretends to be happy to see her old friend. In reality, she falls into a deep depression, especially after she finds a bouquet at home, thanking her for being part of the team all these years. Rereading the word "was," Elizabeth inserts the flash drive into the TV and watches a commercial for a substance whose injection unlocks her DNA and initiates cell division, creating another version of herself. This is the substance, and the person is the Matrix. And while they are two different personalities, they are still the same person, just an improved version that will be younger, more beautiful, and more perfect. Both personalities must exist in symbiosis and switch every 7 days, always remembering that they are one whole. Elizabeth goes to a bar and, watching the happy couples, realizes her loneliness. She returns home, and after long thoughts and memories, she calls the number provided and orders the substance. She is given a postbox number where she can pick up the product, and the call is quickly ended. The woman spends a sleepless night, and in the morning, she sees an ad in the newspaper looking for candidates to replace her as the host of the show. At the same time, there's a letter in the mail with a card and the postbox number for the substance. Elizabeth resolutely heads to pick up the package. Using the card, she opens a hidden door in an old building and finds a storage unit with a package waiting for her. At home, Elizabeth opens the box. All the substance ingredients are neatly packed in bags and labeled activator, stabilizer, the other you, the switch, food for the matrix, food for the other you. The activator only needs to be used once, but the stabilizer must be administered daily, and it's taken from the matrix cells. Most importantly, the pair must switch places every 7 days without exception, and they must always remember that they are one whole. In the morning, Elizabeth spends a long time staring at herself in the mirror, noting the signs of aging. Eventually, she injects the one-time activator, after which she is struck by unbearable pain. The woman falls to the floor, writhing in agony as her back splits open, and from within emerges her younger version. This new personality gradually comes to her senses, and upon looking in the mirror, she sees the reflection of a young and very beautiful girl. For a while, she revels in her new state, but then she notices Elizabeth's body. First, the girl tidies it up, stitching up the horrible tear in her back. Then she goes to her bed. In the morning, the girl takes a shower, and suddenly she feels unwell. She pulls out special syringes and injects herself with the stabilizer, drawn from the spine of the unconscious matrix, Elizabeth. Then she goes to the living room, delighted with her new, young, and strong body. Later, the girl goes to a casting call, buying a seductive swimsuit along the way. She takes the name Sue and has a stunning effect on the producer's assistants and eventually on Harvey himself. Sue is chosen to replace Elizabeth as the show's host. Although the girl immediately warns that every 7 days she will leave to care for her sick mother. This completely wins over Harvey, as the audience will surely love it. Sue begins to enjoy the fame that once belonged to the original version. However, the week flies by, and it's time for the switch. Sue attaches special tubes to her arms, allowing the substance to flow through. Soon Elizabeth comes to, while Sue's body slips into a coma. The woman cleans herself up and goes to the TV studio, where Harvey presents her with a gift from the crew. Back home, Elizabeth marks the days when she can be herself on her calendar. She spends all her time at home. At the end of the week, she receives a message about a new batch of substance delivered to her postbox. After 7 days, they switch again. Sue enjoys her new life, starring in commercials and reveling in her growing popularity. But one day, she starts thinking about the Matrix body and sets up a secret room in the bathroom. Just as she finishes, her neighbor knocks on the door, complaining about the noise from the tools. Seeing Sue, the man is immediately smitten and offers his help, but the girl slams the door and hides Elizabeth's body in the secret room, then replaces her portrait on the wall with her own. Sue's show becomes wildly successful, with the ratings soaring, much to the producer's delight. The girl starts making new friends and attending parties. One evening, she brings a young man home, but when things get intimate, she suddenly feels unwell and remembers that it's time for the switch. Sue rushes to the secret room and performs an additional stabilization procedure. She spends the night with the young man and switches with Elizabeth later than necessary. When Elizabeth wakes up, she finds a living room in disarray and her hands twisted with gout. Struggling to put herself together, she calls the substance provider's number, but they inform her that the changes are irreversible and remind her not to forget that they are one whole. Elizabeth tidies up the apartment and then sees a recording of Sue's new show on TV. She is forced to admit that Sue is very beautiful. Later, she hears the neighbor asking Sue for a date, but she doesn't answer the door. Then she receives a new batch of substance. On her way out, she stops at a cafe where an old man starts a conversation, lamenting that 7 days is too long to wait to return to one's body. He drops his cards, and among them, Elizabeth sees a card identical to her substance card. She recognizes the young nurse who advised her on the experiment in his eyes. He knows that with each time, it becomes harder to remember that you deserve the right to exist. Soon, the second part will literally start consuming her. Elizabeth runs home, bumping into Sue's boyfriend, who of course doesn't recognize her. But this makes her remember Fred. She dials his number, and her ecstatic classmate arranges a meeting at a cafe. Elizabeth dresses up, puts on makeup, and hides her hands under gloves. But unexpectedly, she sees a billboard with Sue on it. Her own reflection immediately disappoints her, and she changes her makeup, then wipes it off entirely. Crying, she rips off her dress and stays home, ignoring Fred's persistent calls, binge eating to cope with her stress and insecurity. When it's Sue's turn again, she steps onto the set and begins the show. However, during the exercises, she suddenly feels something protruding beneath the skin of her buttocks. The girl immediately halts the filming, and while the puzzled cameraman tries to understand what he just shot, she runs to the bathroom, where she finds a lump on her rear and pulls out a fried chicken leg from her navel. She realizes that while she is living an active life, Elizabeth is binge eating at home. Sue is furious. She complains to the substance operator, but all she hears in return is, "They are one whole." Weeks go by. One day, Sue urgently summons Harvey to announce that she will be the new host of their New Year's show, the pinnacle of her career. Sue is overjoyed. However, she is now abusing the stabilizer more and more, which causes Elizabeth's body to age rapidly. When Elizabeth wakes up again, she finds herself old and decrepit, with stiff joints and almost entirely gray hair. The woman calls the substance operator, and he suggests ending the experiment, but there is no way to restore her condition now. She tries to convince herself to stop the experience, but she can't give up such a beautiful second version of herself, even though her knees barely function. She remembers Harvey's gift. It turns out to be a cookbook, and Elizabeth throws herself into learning new recipes with renewed energy, while Sue continues to dominate the TV screens. One day, Elizabeth hears Sue laughing at her, mocking the aging star, which drives her to eat even more. Elizabeth becomes so enraged that she vows to end the experiment. The day for the switch comes, and once again, Sue finds a room full of leftovers and empty bottles. To gain independence and take advantage of the Matrix helplessness, Sue stockpiles stabilizers for 3 months. However, the day before the live broadcast of the show, the stabilizer runs out. Sue calls the supplier to ask for more, but he says Elizabeth is the only source, and they need to switch to replenish the supply. There is simply no other option. Sue, barely conscious, starts the switch. Her boyfriend hears strange noises coming from the bathroom, but the girl doesn't open the door because inside is now a hideous, bald woman with a deformed hump. Finally, she yells at him, and he runs off. Elizabeth, now a horrific creature, calls the substance operator and begs to end the experiment. Then she heads out for the final batch. Returning home, she drags Sue's body into the living room and prepares to inject her with the serum that will kill her duplicate. With the syringe ready, she looks around, staring at the portraits of Sue for a long time. She realizes she can't kill her young version. Elizabeth brings Sue back to consciousness. Seeing the half-empty syringe and realizing what Elizabeth had intended, Sue flies into a rage, beating her Matrix to death. Afterward, she goes to the New Year's show. She is dressed in a gorgeous gown, but suddenly Sue feels unwell and runs to the bathroom. It turns out that with the Matrix dead, Sue's body begins to rapidly deteriorate. First, her teeth fall out, making it impossible for her to smile for the sponsors, which Harvey so desperately wants. Then a nail falls off, and her ear drops off. In a panic, Sue rushes home where she injects herself with the last of the activator, hoping to create a new version of herself. But instead, a monstrous hybrid of both versions, Eliza Sue, is born. The monster recalls her audition and tries to beautify herself by putting on a dress and a homemade Elizabeth mask before heading to the show. When she arrives at the TV center, she steps onto the stage and addresses the audience, but her mask falls off. Screams of horror fill the hall, and she is called a monster. The audience flees in panic, and one man decapitates Eliza Sue, after which her mutilated body floods the entire hall with blood. What's left of Eliza Sue runs out of the studio, and out on the street, it disintegrates into guts. Elizabeth's original face manages to crawl to the actress's star on the Walk of Fame, where it looks up, smiles, and melts away. The next morning, the remaining puddle of blood is scrubbed away, erasing the memory of the actress. At times funny but mostly terrifying, the film dissects society's imposed standards on women's bodies and the pursuit of eternal beauty, forcing viewers to reflect on what it means to be yourself and how important it is to accept who you are. One day, oceanographer Tom's family, his wife Julia and 2 children, Cassie and Ben, set off on a yacht trip in the Caribbean Sea. While Tom and Ben are busy fishing and Cassie is absorbed in her gadget, Julia goes for a swim. Suddenly, something unsettles her. Julia looks around, but the sea remains as calm as ever. However, she feels a distinct sense of dread, as though something large and dangerous is circling around. At the same time, the instruments on the yacht start acting strangely, but Tom, preoccupied with fishing, pays no attention to them. Meanwhile, Julia feels worse and eventually begins to drown. She screams, but the family doesn't hear her. The water seems to shift and pull her farther from the yacht. As the situation becomes critical, Tom finally hears her voice. He rushes to the helm, and the yacht moves toward the distant Julia. Tom dives into the water. With the children's help, they pull her aboard and revive her. Tom is angry as he always asks that swimmers notify the others when going into the water. Julia apologizes and the incident is soon forgotten. Besides, the family has a reason to celebrate. Today is their son Ben's 13th birthday. Tom lights the candles on the cake and everyone congratulates Ben, who receives gifts, while Cassie takes a group photo of the happy family. At that moment, Cassie's boyfriend calls her. He asks her about the swim, but suddenly a sudden and intense storm begins in the background. Cassie is worried, but her boyfriend reassures her that he's safe. The connection cuts off. Cassie tells her parents about the storm on land, but then everyone feels some jolts, rushes to the deck, and sees massive whale carcasses surfacing around the yacht. Tom explains that sometimes whales get disoriented during storms, but these animals are pushing the yacht, threatening their safety. Tom dives into the water and soon returns aboard, injured. While trying to figure out what's going on, he cut himself on the propeller. Julia stitches up the cut on her husband's shoulder, and he explains that the yacht's shafts seem bent, likely from a tail strike. Now they're unlikely to be able to sail away. Later, Cassie tries to re-establish communication, but there's no signal. The radio isn't picking up any signals either. Tom begins calculating their supplies. There's enough water for about 4 days, no more, but they're on a shipping route, so someone is bound to find them. However, ominous sounds come from outside, and when the family steps out onto the deck, they see glowing objects falling from the sky. They fall closer and closer, and Tom, taking a risk, starts the engine. He manages to steer the yacht away from the next meteorite, but the engine is finally damaged. The next object falls so close that the family can see they are artificial satellites of Earth. A strong wind starts blowing, and the instruments go haywire. The terrified family hides inside the yacht, which is being tossed by the waves. They put on life jackets and prepare for the worst when a strange, ringing sound is heard, causing nosebleeds and nausea. Tom tries to signal for help with a flare gun, but it's all in vain. The family barely survives the night. In the morning, they were relieved to find themselves alive, but there's a gaping hole in the side of the yacht, and it's unclear why they're still afloat. The family goes outside and freezes in amazement. The water is gone, and their boat is standing on a rocky outcrop in the middle of a stony desert where the ocean once was. Sometime later, Tom tries to reassure his family, saying that not everyone could have perished. He takes measurements and realizes that the compass is lying. North isn't where it's supposed to be. This means the Earth's poles have shifted. Such a thing has happened on Earth before, but a long time ago. It turns out that the sea has retreated to where the land used to be, and most likely humanity has perished. Cassie can't bear this revelation and runs to the cabin, asking to be left alone. Julia goes to inventory the remaining supplies, while Ben releases a bunch of colorful balloons into the sky, hoping survivors will come to their aid. Meanwhile, Tom turns on the radio, sending out distress signals. Unexpectedly, he hears a response. It's from Naoto, the captain of a small submersible. They were deep underwater when the catastrophe happened, and that's why they survived. However, all communication systems have failed, and expecting help is futile. According to his calculations, the sea will return in about a week, and it will be harsh, so the man advises them to find higher ground and stay there. Julia orders the children to pack their things. Tom directly asks the captain if he can save their children. Naoto explains that the submersible is very small. Unfortunately, Naoto's partner died, and he can only take one person. After some persuasion, Tom convinces Naoto to take both children, and he provides his coordinates. Tom charts a course on the nautical map and promises to reach the location in a couple of days. The next morning, the family is almost ready to embark on their journey. Tom steps onto the deck and suddenly sees a man with a dog approaching. He walks toward him and greets him, but notices that the man is injured. He offers the traveler some water. The man drinks it and then suddenly punches Tom in the face, which Julia sees. She rushes to her husband as the traveler plunges a makeshift spear into Tom's chest. The dog keeps Julia at bay, though she freezes in horror herself. Realizing there's no saving her husband, she runs to the yacht. The man pursues her, injuring her arm. Nevertheless, Julia climbs onto the deck, and the children, hearing her screams, run to her aid. Together, they barricade the doors to the cabin. After that, Julia hides Cassie and Ben in a locker, giving her daughter the flare gun and instructing her to shoot only as a last resort. Meanwhile, the killer tries to break down the doors and eventually succeeds. Julia hides in the bathroom, patching up her wound. Entering, the intruder heads straight to the galley and grabs some food. It's clear that he's very hungry. Holding a can of food, the man begins searching the yacht, while Julia arms herself with a kitchen knife. He enters the cabin, but the woman jumps overboard, hiding beneath the yacht. The killer peers through the hole but doesn't see her. However, the dog attacks Julia, forcing her to kill it. The man hears the yelp, goes outside, and finds the dog's body. Meanwhile, Julia climbs back onto the yacht through the portholes on the opposite side. She falls straight into the killer's hands. He beats her, throws her onto a couch, and grabs her throat, intending to strangle her. Cassie witnesses all this and realizes it's the last resort. She opens the locker and fires at the man. The shot throws him to the side, but the flare sets the yacht on fire. Julia orders the children to flee while she sneaks into the galley. The killer, only injured, tries to attack again. Julia kicks him away, grabs the packed bags, and jumps overboard, where Ben finds his father's body. Cassie runs to the corpse and sobs over it. Julia kisses her deceased husband, but seeing the killer leap from the burning yacht, she takes the children and leaves. The boat explodes behind them. The family runs across the stony desert and soon takes shelter in a rocky canyon, where a stream flows. However, the water is salty and undrinkable. Cassie shares a small amount of water with her brother, but he refuses to drink. The boy feels guilty, believing the killer came because he saw the balloons. Cassie also voices this thought, but Julia orders her to stop and defends her son, explaining that he didn't mean any harm. She tells the children to gather themselves, as a long journey awaits. And then she spots the killer again, still relentlessly following their trail. The family hurries onward. That evening, Ben finds the carcass of a hammerhead shark and tries to butcher it. But Julia sees the pursuer and orders the children to run. They soon come across a field of once flooded toxic waste barrels, but Julia urges the children forward despite the threat of contamination, knowing the killer is still on their heels. The family walks along the former ocean floor, weaving through piles of plastic and other trash dumped by humans. Soon, Julia notices that Ben is severely dehydrated and gives him the last drops of water. Cassie has a breakdown, convinced that they have no chance of survival, but Julia commands them to keep moving. Eventually, they find the fuselage of a plane that crashed into the sea long ago and crawl inside to rest. Julia examines the last photo of their family and recounts the story of her first meeting with Tom, which happened at her hospital, where Tom was brought with decompression sickness after a failed dive. The children weep, remembering their father and saying their final goodbyes to him. At night, Cassie is awakened by a noise and steps outside to sit near the plane. Out of the darkness, the killer approaches her, unaware that the girl is acting as bait. As he prepares to grab her, Julia ambushes him, stabbing the man with a knife. At dawn, the family prepares to continue their journey, only to discover the killer's body has been scavenged. A sign that something even more dangerous than humans lurks in the desert. They move on. Julia consults the map when Ben suddenly rushes ahead. His mother yells for him to stop, but the boy sprints toward a salty puddle and manages to drink a few gulps. Julia drags him away, but the boy becomes sick. Soon they come across some plastic chairs and build a makeshift shelter from the sun, resting inside it. Suddenly, Julia hears strange sounds. She steps outside and sees something that forces her to wake the children. Realizing the new danger, they begin running. Soon they spot a large ship in the distance, surrounded by crashed containers and a few wandering people. Julia calls out to them, but they, seeing thousands of giant crabs, dash into a container and lock the doors, ignoring her pleas for help. The three climb onto a container, though the crabs manage to wound Julia in the leg. Nevertheless, Julia, Cassie, and Ben sit on top, watching the crabs penetrate through a crack in the doors, killing everyone inside despite the people's attempts to fend them off. Julia ties a scarf around her leg and passes out. The next morning, she wakes up alone, terrified, and calls for the children. But it turns out the crabs have moved on, and the children had gone down to search for food and weapons. Julia cauterizes her wound while Ben examines the found weapons. Searching through the containers, they find a small amount of food and water. In the pocket of one of the deceased, Julia finds a radio and contacts Nato. He responds, explaining that he was also attacked by deep-sea arthropods. Based on his observations, the sea will return soon, which is why the creatures have emerged. Julia begs him to save her children, but she's unsure where to go because she's lost the map. Nato fires a flare. Ben sees the direction, and the family rushes toward it. Soon they see a yellow submarine in the distance, but reaching it is difficult due to the terrain of the former seabed. Cassie dislikes her mother's talk about saving the children, but Julia refuses to answer and pushes the family onward. They are forced to pass through a canyon contaminated with toxic waste. At one point, they are caught in a rock slide, and Julia becomes separated from the children. She orders them to continue, and when Cassie refuses, Julia pleads with her to save her brother. Cassie and Ben make it out of the canyon and reach the submarine, but inside, there's no one. Suddenly, Naoto, badly wounded, emerges from behind the boat. He admits that he has no chance of surviving and orders them to climb aboard, but Cassie goes back for her mother, who is fending off the emerging crabs. Her bullets nearly depleted, Cassie climbs the rock barrier and extends her hand to her mother. They manage to reach the submarine just as the crabs overrun Naoto, who dies in their claws. The family climbs aboard, and just then an ocean wave crests over the horizon. The water lifts the submarine and drags it across the rocks, and as Julia watches everything that happened over the past few days flash before her eyes, she passes out. When she awakens, she finds the vessel at a standstill. Julia opens the hatch, and the family emerges to find themselves in a ruined city, carried there by the wave. Despite a great concept, the film failed to make an impact, largely due to the many mistakes made by its creators. In February 1959, a group of 9 Soviet tourists went missing in the mountains of the northern Urals. 2 weeks later, their bodies were found at the base of Mount Otterton, which in the language of the indigenous people meant the Mountain of the Dead. The place was named after the leader of the expedition, the Dyatlov Pass. Many years later, American student Holly King became so interested in this case that she decided to gather a new group and go to this mysterious place. The catalyst was a film about an expedition by American scientists who tried to solve the mystery of the Dyatlov group's death but achieved no success. Holly's professor suggested she take up this case for her psychology project, and she invited her friend Jensen to work on it as a film director. They applied for and won a grant. The professor mentioned that she first learned about these events from a novella by Soviet journalist Yarovoy, who soon died in a car accident after the book's release. Jensen suspected that this was how the authorities tried to cover up something terrible. And although people now know a lot about the events of those years, the complete picture remains a mystery. The most common explanation is hypothermic dementia. Although this can happen to those exposed to freezing, in this case, all 9 experienced tourists started undressing at the same time, which is simply impossible. Another frequent explanation is an avalanche. But if they heard the avalanche, why did they sit near the camp for 3 hours without shoes? So there are many answers to this question, one of which involves the secrets of the Russian military, making it seem that the truth will never be known. The first stage of the journey is a flight from Oregon to Chelyabinsk, from where the group will head to the Mountain of the Dead, named by the Mansi people due to a series of unexplained deaths and mysterious disappearances. So the expedition included sound engineer Denise, climber Andy, president of the Northwest Pathfinders Association, who has conquered all the steep peaks in the USA, and his friend Hauser, who spent a whole year conquering the Himalayas. After gathering the group, the guys began to prepare, buying rations, studying maps, and training in the mountains. On January 25th, the team set off. Sometime later, news broke across all U.S. TV channels about the disappearance of 5 Oregon students in the Ural Mountains. Rescuers managed to find their belongings, tents, backpacks, and other equipment. A Russian TV correspondent reported details about the more than strange disappearance of the group of American documentarians, although experts are constructing their versions of the reasons for the disappearance. In winter, the temperature here can drop to -50 degrees, with strong, piercing winds, whose direction constantly changes. This means that if a person walks against the wind and thinks they are walking straight, they might actually be walking in circles. There are speculations about the intervention of some extraterrestrial devices, which many witnesses saw in these places, or even about the appearance of the Yeti. The Mansi elders recall rumbling and fiery balls over the mountains on the days when the Dyatlov group disappeared. They consider these places a portal to the other world. The students wanted to repeat the infamous Dyatlov expedition, and it seems they succeeded. Rescuers managed to find a camera that captured the last days of the documentarians' lives. A group of hackers posted frames on their portal, showing Holly talking about the darkness that followed her from the open door, while Jensen calms the girl, although she is sure they will not get out of this place. The action shifts to a month earlier, when lively and cheerful students are traveling to the Urals. On the train, they are having fun, hoping for success and worldwide fame. Andy is proud of his acquisition, a phone with GPS, which will help them navigate the mountains, while Holly conducts tests to find out people's desire to hike. Soon the group arrives in the town of Evedal, where they plan to interview the only surviving member of the Dyatlov expedition, who left the route due to illness, but now he is held in a psychiatric hospital. However, doctors do not allow the Americans inside, and they only manage to see the old man showing them a note saying, "Leave." In the evening, the group goes to a local bar. The bartender pours them local moonshine and says that the Dyatlov group stopped here in 1959 and drank the same thing as the Americans. There, they meet Sergei, who speaks English and drives them to the village of Visa, the last point before heading out on the road. The man tells them that his aunt, an English teacher, participated in the search for the Dyatlov group. She claims that in 1959, not 9 but 11 bodies were found near the Mountain of the Dead. Next to the last two, which looked very different from the others, lay some unknown device. But none of this was mentioned in the reports. After the conversation, the guys set off on foot. At night they stop and set up camp, as the weather begins to change. Hauser prepares a camp dinner, and the guys have fun joking with each other. At night, people see strange lights in the sky and recall reports of orange flashes over the Dyatlov camp, but they decide they still won't be able to solve this mystery and go to sleep. However, in the morning, they notice numerous barefoot tracks of unusual sizes around the tents, resembling human ones. The main thing is that the tracks have no beginning or end, as if some creatures did not come to the camp but flew in. Nevertheless, they set off to explore the area. Soon the students find an abandoned meteorological station, around which the same tracks are found, and in the station's booth lies a torn-out human tongue. Denise panics and asks Holly to leave, but Jensen tells her about a pass in China where animals and birds crash into cliffs and people go insane and die. It is said to happen because of the sound of the wind. Holly admits that she had a similar dream. Mountains, snow, and some door with darkness behind it. And then she heard about the Dyatlov Pass and realized that she would find out everything here. During their conversation, the camera captures two human figures running far in the background. Later they go further and unexpectedly come to the Dyatlov Pass. Once, 9 people set up camp in this very place, had dinner, and went to sleep. But somewhere between 9 and 11 at night, something that the authorities called an unknown irresistible force forced them to leave the tent in such horror that they cut it from the inside and ran into the night, where it was minus 28 degrees. Holly marks the places where their bodies were found. The first deceased, Rustem Slobodin, Igor Dyatlov, the group's leader and the most experienced tourist. It was probably his idea to leave the tent. Zinaida Kolmogorova was closest to the camp, the only victim who resisted, as her tongue and most of her oral cavity were torn out. Lyudmila Dubinina, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, Alexander Zolotaryov, Alexander Kolevatov. The cause of death for all was called hypothermia, but Rustem and Nikolai had serious skull injuries, and Lyudmila and Alexander had broken ribs, which was not observed in others. There were no signs of an attack on any of the bodies, no external injuries. Something broke the skulls of 2 men and the ribs of 2 people without leaving even bruises. Moreover, Alexander's body had a high level of radiation. But from where, and why only on him? Georgy Krivonashenko and Yuri Doroshenko, when others ran away, sat by the extinguished fire and froze to death. While Holly is conducting research, Andy is surprised that their group somehow covered 22 kilometers in one day. Everyone's watches, GPS, and even the compass stopped working. Some guys suggest leaving the mountains before it's too late, but Holly persuades them to stay and finish the film. At night, Holly notices that the Geiger counter starts signaling, and together with Jensen, they go up the slope, where they find a high but not deadly level of radiation. Unexpectedly, the students discover the entrance to a bunker, closed with an iron door. Holly wants to open it, although Jensen is categorically against it, as Russian authorities did not build it here for nothing, closing something dangerous in the mountain. However, it turns out that the door is open and just a bit frozen. Holly asks Jensen not to tell the others about the discovery to avoid causing panic among the already scared team. They return to the camp and settle for the night. Around 6 a.m., a huge avalanche roars down the mountains, killing Denise, injuring Andy, and sweeping away the tents and almost all supplies. At first, everyone quarrels, trying to find the culprit of the tragedy, but gradually they realize it was an attempt on their expedition. They help Andy and try to contact the outside world somehow. Holly tells them about the bunker, which enrages Hauser since they are freezing here in the snow, while it might be warm there. The students launch a signal flare and wait for help. After some time, 2 people arrive, claiming they saw the flare, but Andy does not believe them, since they have no backpacks, and could not have reached here so quickly. He stays to hold them back while the others are ordered to run. The strangers shoot Andy and wound Hauser. Holly, Jensen, and the wounded Hauser barely manage to get into the bunker. The strangers pursue them, but the students close the door. The Americans turn on the lighting, although it is dim and flickering. Running through the tunnels, they find a laboratory full of various devices and documents, among which are old journals with the names of people who died in the line of duty. There are also details about the famous American experiment with the teleportation of the USS Eldridge. Hauser feels unwell and stays put, as Holly promises to find an exit in return for him. The students continue on alone. Soon, Holly and Jensen find the bodies of soldiers who recently died. One of them is missing a tongue, presumably the one they found earlier at the station. But the other bodies are very old and even skeletonized. The two open another door, behind which they sense movement. Suddenly, under the flashlight, they see exactly the same camera they have. Moreover, it has their recordings on it. Jensen recalls the teleportation of the Eldridge, which likely happened to them too. At that time, many soldiers mutated, turning into something incomprehensible. At that moment, they hear Hauser's screams and rush to him, finding their friend being torn apart by two humanoid mutants. Noticing the newcomers, the mutants attack them. Resembling skeletons covered in skin, the mutants seem to possess the ability to teleport as they appear out of nowhere in any place. Jensen and Holly leave their friend's body, run out of the bunker, and close the door. To their surprise, the mutants do not chase after them. The survivors turn around, and instead of a snowy field, they see a fossil forming a huge round tunnel. The students realize that this is the path for the mutants' teleportation. Holly throws debris inside and sees that the passage is activated. Looking around, the couple finds drawings on the walls made by the local inhabitants and understands that they discovered this place, built by an ancient civilization once living under these mountains. Such portals can be anything, even weapons scattered around the world, which explains many great mysteries. They do not know where it might take them, to which space or time, but Jensen suggests they need to mentally focus on the place they intend to go. And it will work. The only place that they both clearly imagine is the surroundings of their camp near the bunker entrance. They have no choice but to head into the tunnel. The plot shifts back to 1959, when a Soviet girl from the search team finds their bodies and is very surprised because the rescuers have already found all 9 participants of the expedition. Approaching Soviet soldiers take the bodies to the bunker, while one major picks up the Americans' camera, not understanding what it is. The soldier wants to place the Americans with the other bodies, but the major orders them to be placed in a separate room for examination by a doctor. Undressing the deceased, the soldiers are astonished by the unusual clothing for the 1950s. The naked bodies of Holly and Jensen, now looking like mutant bodies, are hung on hooks in a separate cell. The sergeant places the camera under a light. When everyone leaves, the creatures begin to revive. The man lifts his head and looks at the woman. She directs her gaze at the camera, and an angel wing tattoo is visible on the right side of her neck, the same one Holly had. Despite some inconsistencies, the storyline adheres to most known facts, although the American-Russian creative team skillfully handled the mystified legacy of the USSR. However, the found footage effect combined with acting, special effects, and magnificent locations is good enough to ensure the thriller's watchability. Sunny Atlanta. The 13th day of quarantine in the city is on the brink of extinction. Panic and horror surround those who have managed to survive. No one understands how it will all end, but how did it all begin? 2 weeks before the current events. An ordinary day in Atlanta does not portend anything unusual. The city is bustling with life. Elementary school teacher, Caddy Frank, brings her students on a field trip to the local hospital. At the same time, on one of the floors of the clinic, Dr. Sanders finds herself in quarantine due to an unknown illness. The woman remembers that shortly before the first symptoms appeared, she had contact with a patient from Syria who was sick. In another part of the city, Jenna also feels unwell, but not because of the virus. She is anxious about moving in with her boyfriend Alex. At the last moment, Jenna backs out and confesses to a cop that she is not ready to rush. Alex is unable to sort things out with his girlfriend because he is called to the department. There, a major meeting is being planned, where the police are asked to prepare for a difficult situation in the city. There is a suspicion that the Syrian brought an unknown virus to Atlanta and quarantine may need to be declared. Dr. Sabina Lomers speaks to the police officers. She also talks about the threat of an epidemic but assures the audience that nothing serious is happening. Another main character who will face difficult trials is Teresa. The pregnant woman visits her mother's shop, where her mother reminds her that she is expected at the adoption agency, which is looking for parents for her daughter. The reminder upsets Teresa, but her boyfriend reassures her and assures her that he has everything under control. They will run away tonight and no one will be able to take their child. Caddy's students perform for the patients, but the teacher is concerned about why Dr. Sanders did not meet them. The doctor on duty pretends not to know about the colleague's fate and does not tell the teacher about the infected doctor's condition. Caddy begins to suspect something strange is happening soon. When they were about to leave, the doctors announce that the children will have to stay a little longer. The hospital is under quarantine and everyone must undergo a thorough check. Dr. Lorms arranges a secret meeting with Alex and asks him to take the situation under personal control. She admits that she has extensive experience but has never encountered such a virus before. According to the expert, the danger threatens not only Atlanta but the entire world. On-call officers are sent to the Zero Patients home, from where the doctors believe the epidemic began. Cops protect themselves as much as possible with shields and gloves and convince the patients' relatives that they should also take safety measures. The boy is in serious condition and is taken to the hospital despite his attempt to escape. Caddy realizes that her son and his friend Thomas have run away. The teacher goes in search of the boys just as the Zero patient is being brought in. The woman notices the patient but refuses to leave the corridor until her students are found. Officer Jake Riley volunteers to help Caddy. Together they search for the missing boys, and the pair witnesses an even more terrifying sight: the bodies of Dr. Sanders and her fiancé. Fresh news reports indicate that the situation has worsened. The Zero patient died after a severe period. The cops also learn about what happened to Dr. Sanders. But more frightening to the police is the fact that all the emigrants' relatives were also infected. This means the virus spreads very quickly and kills the host within 48 hours. Caddy finds the boys in a rat lab. It seems the danger is over, but the doctor informs her that the quarantine is extended for 2 days and no one will be able to leave the hospital earlier. During the report, Dr. Connor informs the police that they have identified the virus. He assures them that traces of the pathogen were found in the Zero patient's personal belongings, and it all looks like an attempt to deliberately cause an infection. Teresa arrives at the train station to leave for her boyfriend's relatives, but unexpectedly, the train refuses to take new passengers and passes by. Upon learning that Jake is locked in the hospital, Alex directly asks Dr. Lorms about what is happening. The expert admits that a border is being established around the area that cannot be crossed for several days. By evening, panic begins in the city. People are surrounded by an iron fence, and many find themselves separated from their loved ones. Teresa learns that she and Xander are also on opposite sides of the cordon, and the girl will have to decide what to do next. Despite the measures taken, the number of infected continues to grow. At night, experts conduct an autopsy on the Zero patient and discover that the virus affects all vital organs. Furthermore, there is evidence that it takes only 48 hours from infection to the end. There is no chance of recovery, and if a vaccine is not found soon, the world faces serious trouble. Alex manages to contact Jenna and asks her to stay in a safe place. The girl decides to lock herself in her office. Returning to her mother's shop, Teresa calls Xander and tells him that she is okay. Despite this, the boy promises to find a way and get to her through the dangerous fence. Jenna is joined by her colleagues who did not manage to leave the city. Meanwhile, the girl's fiancé receives a warning that he should not break the rules due to personal attachments. Jake is asked to help the doctors sort through the belongings of the sick to find their relatives. Examining the Zero patient's mobile phone, the guy notices a frightening detail. A day before his death, the young man communicated with a blonde woman who had not been known about before. Jake immediately reports his findings to his colleagues, and the department decides to send a squad to search for the stranger. The police find the blonde's address, but her parents say she has not been seen since yesterday. Another emergency meeting is called, and everyone is ordered to find the girl within hours. While waiting for the doctor, Caddy listens to a news broadcast talking about the Zero patient and the doctors who contracted the virus from him. For the first time, the woman notices discrepancies, but her thoughts are interrupted by Dr. Connor, who assures the teacher that everything will end soon and she and the children will be able to go home. Leaving, Caddy still decides to ask about her suspicions. She was surprised that Dr. Sanders died before the Syrian who supposedly infected her, but Connor avoids answering, muttering something about differences in immunity. Jake is sent to find the girl, and the authorities hope to hide the fact that the infected person is behind the fence. But it is no longer possible to help the blonde. The cops find her in serious condition in the apartment of old friends. The blonde and her friends are taken to the quarantine zone. But Lorms admits to Alex that the situation is too serious. The virus spreads faster than they could have anticipated. Alex calls his fiancée to reassure her, but he does not dare to tell her what the city is facing. The police have been ordered to strengthen the cordon and use weapons in case of violations. More people with symptoms of infection continue to arrive at the hospital. Among them, Jake sees many children, but the doctor says that this is not the worst. The hospital is running out of free beds and soon there will be nowhere to isolate the sick. In addition to the bad news, the officer has an unpleasant task. Connor asks him to cremate the bodies to prevent outbreaks of other diseases. Another problem for the authorities is Leo Green, a local journalist. He continues to publish panic-inducing videos, and Lormes instructs Alex to stop the provocateur. The cop tries to negotiate with Leo, but the journalist is sure that the authorities are hiding something and he must get to the truth. A few minutes later, a new video from Green appears online, this time attracting the president's attention. Jenna's colleagues realize that they will not have enough food until the end of the quarantine, and the men decide to go to the store. The girl does not like this idea, but the majority votes to take the risk. Teresa's mother also takes the situation lightly. The girl sees her mother raising prices on essential goods to make a profit. To entertain the children, Caddy takes them to the roof. This gives everyone a chance to breathe fresh air, but the girl does not have time to relax. Thomas runs away, ignoring the teacher's cries. The girl finds the student on the stairs, next to a sick man. Drops fall on the boy, and it becomes clear that he is now infected. Thomas is sent to isolation, and the teacher blames herself. She tells the doctor that she promised the boy's father to take care of Thomas, but let him down. The men return with full bags of groceries, but Jenna does not let them into the office. She notices that her friend took off his gloves, meaning he could have brought the virus on his hands. A customer who was charged too much brings her friends. They raid the store, but Teresa's mother is saved by Jake's appearance, who received orders to patrol the city. Caddy finds Thomas's ward empty. She catches up with the boy at the hospital exit, and his father refuses to leave his son in the quarantine zone. The doctors have no choice but to let the patient go. Alex's pleas have no effect on Leo, and in pursuit of a hot story, he allows his colleagues to leave the closed area. He is not even frightened by the fact that one of the girls has symptoms of the disease. Alex and Jake manage to meet secretly on neutral territory. Both guys are nervous, but they have to work together. Leo Green tells the whole world how to leave the closed area. The police have to hold back the crowd while workers cut the ladder. This leads to serious riots and the cops have to open fire to kill. To prevent such incidents, the government shuts down the internet and phone communication, depriving everyone of the only joy, talking to each other. Caddy accidentally enters a closed room and learns the truth about the number of victims, among them or her students. At the same time, Jenna also tries to get to the truth, and she assembles a radio phone to call Alex. The girl has to climb to the roof to get the antenna, where she meets Sam, a technician who hid on the roof to avoid infection. Alex changes partners and goes on night duty. In the middle of the night, he notices an intruder and asks him to stop. The criminal turns out to be Xander, who is trying to enter the danger zone to his fiancée, but the cop does not let him do it and pulls the trigger. The bullet turns out to be rubber, and Xander is simply taken to the hospital. The officer visits him and apologizes, but warns that he will do the same thing next time. Leo decides to take advantage of this. He is preparing a scandalous report about the abuse of power. The store is visited by robbers again, but this time Teresa is also in danger. However, unexpectedly, the women are saved by another gang planning to profit from the quarantine. By the end of the day, Xander's ward is empty. The nurse says he left with Leo Green, but Alex does not have time to stop them. The duty officer reports that the guy has entered the infection zone. Dr. Connor shows Jake the rats that were injected with the medicine. Unfortunately, right before the cop's eyes, the animal passes out, and the hope for a quick rescue disappears. Jenna manages to call Alex, but the call lasts only a few seconds. The girl does not have time to learn anything. Leo accidentally learns about the call. He again hints to the officer that he has taken the wrong side and should think about what is happening. In gratitude for his help, Leo asks Xander to visit his friends and record a video message with them. The guy completes the task and throws the flash drive over the wall, but on it, the journalist finds evidence that his friends are no longer alive. After this, Xander finally finds his fiancée, but raiders block his way. The general panic is compounded by a new problem: hunger. People's food supplies begin to run out, and the government is forced to find a solution. Walking down the corridor with her son, Caddy meets an old man who supplies the hospital with lab rats. The woman notices another inconsistency. She saw Bert with the rodents before the quarantine, but he assures her that this is not the case. Lammers asks Alex to organize food delivery to the danger zone. The policeman asks for time to prepare, but is refused. He must do it by tomorrow without explanation. Alex has to ask Jake for help. The guy is also not thrilled with the idea, but they have no other choice. Early in the morning, the loading begins, and hundreds of people come to get their rations. The gang from the store also gathers for the distribution, and the leader orders Xander to go with them to stay clean. Jenna goes outside for the first time in many days to get some food. She approaches the distribution center, but a gangster car passes by, making her uneasy. Jake recognizes his friend and gives her a ration without a cue. He also hands her Alex's keys and asks her to hold on, as everything should end soon. Constantly thinking about the epidemic and inconsistencies, Caddy again turns to the doctor with questions, but he is clearly not willing to talk about it. The doctor assures the teacher that he knows no more about the virus than she does. The humanitarian point is surrounded by the store gang. There are many more bandits, and they take the food boxes to sell them to hungry people later. Alex is furious that the leadership did not listen to him, and the products fell into the hands of bandits. But Lammers does not see this as a problem. She believes that residents still have a chance to buy food and satisfy their hunger. Jake's partner turns out to be infected, and the officer offers him help, but the officer refuses to go to the hospital. He knows that no one can help him, and decides to solve the problem on his own. Returning to the shelter, Jenna falls into the hands of other bandits who also try to take the box. The woman is saved by Sam, whom she recently refused to let into the office, but the friends remember Jenna's recent act and, despite everything, do not let her or Sam into the clean zone. Alex and Jake meet again, and the senior partner admits that he no longer trusts the leadership. He tells his friend that, due to the robbery, he had to leave his subordinate in the danger zone. At this moment, this very subordinate calls Chief Besser and reports that their plan worked. Jake tells Caddy that she was right, something is being hidden from them. Dr. Sanders and her boyfriend had no personal belongings, but the conversation has to be postponed. Thomas's sister is admitted to the hospital, asking the teacher to find the boy. Their father died, and Thomas is left alone. Alex also begins to doubt the leadership's honesty, and he goes to Leo's house to hear his version. He finds the journalist drunk, but the guy comes to his senses and promises to help in the search for answers. Despite Jacob's persuasion, Caddy goes in search of Thomas. The gang is joined by the very cops sent by the police chief. He promises the bandits a radio phone in exchange for being accepted into the group. Thomas is not at home, but Caddy discovers her son, who secretly followed her. Quentin tells his mother that he knows where to look for his friend, and the company heads to the baseball field. The search for the truth has to be postponed. Alex is tasked with removing a man from an empty house who is preventing it from being demolished. The cop has to spend a lot of time talking about the happy past the city has lost. Teresa's mother helps the lovers escape. She gives the couple a bag of baby things and tells them to wait for her in a safe place. The company finds Thomas's things, but they are surrounded by a crowd of crazy racers. Jake has to open fire, and only then do the young people continue to search for the boy. Caddy finds her son and his friend, but they are near an infected man. The teacher is frightened, but Thomas assures her that he cannot get infected. Xander and Teresa come to Jenna's office and ask for shelter. One of the girl's friends is against the couple entering, but Jenna lets the guests in without his approval. Thomas is placed in isolation, but Caddy has hope that the boy indeed has immunity and can save everyone. During the meeting, Alex hands Jake a flash drive with a damaged file. If it can be restored, they will learn the truth, but only Jenna can do it. In return, the officer also receives a memory card with a message for the old man from the empty house. When he delivers the message, the stubborn man cannot hold back his tears. Teresa sorts through the baby things and finds the radio phone her mother stole. At that moment, the phone's owners appear at the door, holding a gun to the girl's mother's head. The company has to open the door, but the bandit refuses to take the phone and leave. He demands that Teresa and her boyfriend go with him. Unexpectedly, Jake comes to the rescue. He convinces the gangster to leave and leave the office alone. Alex sees hundreds of people moving in an unknown direction, but no one can say where they will be placed. Jenna tries to open the file, but it is severely damaged. The girl does not have time to do anything with it. New guests appear in the office, a gang wanting access to prohibited drugs. The company begins to strengthen their shelter, but the intruders find weak spots through which they manage to penetrate inside. Tony decides to take a risk. He goes down to negotiate with the criminals, but the negotiations fail. The elevator returns Tony with an axe in his back. In addition to the deceased guy, one of the attackers enters the office, but he does not have time to harm anyone. The guy is infected and collapses at the entrance to the room. Jenna finally manages to restore the file, but the girl does not have time to watch it. The power goes out in the office, and all the doors are locked. To restore power, Jenna has to leave the shelter and go downstairs. Meanwhile, the bandits almost manage to open the elevator doors, but the girl raises the switch in time. On the way back, Jenna takes the radio phone and calls Alex. Talking to his fiancée, the officer hears her being attacked. The girl manages to break free and return to the office, but the intruders do not retreat and try to cut through the door. The company has no choice but to come up with the craziest plan. Alex tries to penetrate the closed zone to help his fiancée, but he is caught by the National Guard soldiers. Jenna orders everyone to take cover, and when the psychos burst into the office, Jake activates an explosive device. A fire starts, but all the attackers are unconscious. Unexpectedly, one of them jumps up and attacks Teresa's mother. The men manage to neutralize him, but the woman is infected. Alex is arrested, but unaware of this, Jenna asks Jake to call her fiancé and calm him down. She also mentions that the phone the bandits had has a government military number and they need to figure out how it ended up in the infection zone. Teresa's mother leaves. As a farewell, she asks her daughter for forgiveness for not wanting to accept her child. More than 48 hours have passed since Thomas's contact with the infected, and the boy continues to look healthy. His DNA is implanted in rats to try to create a vaccine. Connor reports his observations to the leadership, but the boss tells the guy that they don't have time for experiments. Caddy and Jake review footage from surveillance cameras and find out that the zero patient was not the immigrant boy, but a certain Henry Burns. He came every morning to secretly meet with Dr. Sanders, and judging by the man's behavior, he knew about his illness. Dr. Connor allows Thomas to leave and informs everyone that the boy does not just have immunity, his body defeated the virus. This means that based on his DNA, they will be able to make a cure for the unknown virus. Jenna leads her friends to a church under which there are ancient tunnels. The girl plans to lead the group out of the cordon through them to safety. Alex tells Leo everything he learned from Jake, but the journalist cannot find any trace of Henry Burns. The men get the impression that the zero patient was deliberately sent to the hospital. Lammers returns Alex's badge and authority, but in return she demands that the cop take Thomas out of the infected zone and hand him over for experiments in her unit. Dr. Connor disagrees with Lammers' decision, but she rejects all objections and insists that only her laboratory can find the cure. Everyone has hope for a quick return to peace and normal life. It seems not everyone will live to see this happy moment, but some decide not to waste time and enjoy the moment, using all possible safety measures. Leo finds out that 2 days before the epidemic started, Burns received a package with the virus. Now he wants to know who the sender was, but Alex asks him to postpone the investigation so he can carry out the order. All night the company breaks through the exit to the tunnel, and in the morning they finally go underground. At the same time, Caddy and Jake go to the meeting place to hand Thomas over to Alex. Dr. Connor realizes he was wrong. The patient bitten by a rat injected with Thomas's DNA is infected. During the seizure, he infects several more people, and the doctor understands that the boy is an asymptomatic carrier. If he leaves the cordon, the virus will take over the entire city. The company has to return due to gas that has accumulated underground. They remain in the infection zone. Meanwhile, Thomas ends up in the hold-the zone between districts. He is met by Alex and Dr. Lammers, but at the last moment, the transfer is cancelled and the boy is sent back. While Alex tries to figure out what to do next, he receives a voice message from Leo. The journalist claims that the virus was created by Connor. Alex and Lammers remain in quarantine in the container between the zones. Thomas is returned to the clinic and quarantined to figure out what to do next. Jenna's company returns. The group could not go underground due to accumulated gas, but the office is empty. Teresa and Xander left to find a cleaner place. On the main street, the guy begins to suspect he was wrong. Hundreds of protesters are holding a rally demanding to be released from the infected zone. Xander tries to protect the girl from the crowd, but Teresa sees her mother in the crowd and tries to break through to her. Not wanting to risk his pregnant girlfriend, the guy decides to check who she saw in the crowd. Jake arranges a date for Caddy, and the couple has a great time until a frightened Quentin runs into the room. The boy says that old man Ray took the other children and led them out of the hospital to break through with the others. Leo meets with an ex-girlfriend and asks her to get Connor's call details. He has no doubt that the doctor's to blame, but to prove it, he needs facts. Xander realizes that Teresa was mistaken, but as a result, he encounters an infected person. The boy manages to escape. Unlike Bert, the old man has his box of medicine taken from him and falls to the ground. The street riots intensify, and a squad is sent to the danger zone. Lammers tries to stop the captain, but he does not listen to the doctor's orders, and several vehicles head through the cordon. Jake finds Ray, but the girl he took with him is not there. The old man abandoned her because of virus symptoms. Caddy spots Mary before Jake can tell her about the infection, and the woman takes the child into her arms despite the blood. The The crazed crowd pushes Teresa to the ground. Xander runs to her but is afraid to touch his girlfriend for fear of infecting her. When Jake finds his friend, it becomes clear that she is now also sick. Caddy realizes this from her boyfriend's look and upon returning to the hospital, tries to wash off all traces of the infection. Leo gets the information he needs, but it does not match his assumptions. Moreover, his friend tells the journalist that Burns called someone on an encrypted phone that only high-ranking officials can have that day. Susie, Jenna's friend, confesses that she is expecting a baby. Going for a test to check this, Jenna meets Xander and Teresa, who stayed on the street after the riot. Caddy ends up in isolation, and Jake tries to support her, but the girl's nerves can no longer withstand it. After 48 hours, Dr. Lammers and Alex are released from the container. There are only 8 hours left until the end of Caddy's quarantine. At the same time, Teresa's baby is about to be born. Alex visits Leo and finds out that on the day of the infection, Burns did not call Connor, but Lammers. There is no doubt that she started the epidemic for some personal purpose. Dr. Connor conducts his first round after leaving isolation. When he reaches Caddy, he admits that he cannot release her. The onset of symptoms has increased, and 48 hours is no longer a guarantee of health. The soldiers who participated in stopping the riot were infected. Lammers reports this to the journalists, but she promises to find a cure and save the country. At Alex's request, Jake inspects the apartment of Leo's friends, who were also investigating. There he finds ashes, all that remains of the documents and evidence. When friends meet to discuss this, Alex realizes that Lammers and the police chief are involved. Dennis, the father of Susan's child, returns to the office, but the man shows signs of infection on his face, and the company refuses to let him in. To make it easier for the man, Susan tells him that there was a mistake. She is not pregnant, and he has nothing to blame himself for. Alex meets with the chief and says he knows the truth, but it turns out that Besser did not know that Lammers released the virus into the masses. Jenna and Susan fail to ease Teresa's pain, but as usual, Jake appears at the right time. The guy calms the young mother and helps her daughter be born. Alex asks Leo not to publish material against Lammers until they have substantial evidence. An argument begins between the men, and the journalist agrees to wait no more than 2 hours. Not wanting to waste time, Alex goes directly to the doctor and asks her to resign. Lammers tries to intimidate the officer, but when she realizes he is not joking, the woman promises to hold a conference and leave her post. Teresa shows Xander their daughter, and the baby is placed in a crib made of boxes. Jake tells Caddy about this joyful event, but the girl's delight is overshadowed by a cough with traces of blood. Lammers gives a press conference, but does not admit her guilt. She claims that Dr. Connor accidentally released the virus. Still unaware of this, Connor conducts experiments and tries to find a cure. Jake asks him to try to save Caddy, and the doctor agrees to give her a trial dose of serum from Thomas's blood. Old man Bert regains consciousness and discovers that his leg is broken. Despite this, he finds the box of medicine and tries to get home, where his wife has been waiting for him all this time. Connor learns what Lammers did. He does not understand why his colleague did this to him, but despite this, the doctor does not give up trying to save Caddy. Giving her the injection, Connor tells the girl how the virus penetrated their clinic. Jenna meets Bert and gives him her water. She also gives the old man a cart so he can finally reach his wife. After the injection, Caddy gets worse. She is tormented by nightmares and barely waits until morning. To support his friend, Jake brings a TV and invites her to the movies. The couple spends the whole day together, but Caddy gets worse again, and she decides to confess her love to her boyfriend, fearing that there may not be another chance. Jenna tells her friend about her conversation with the gangsters. Trader Miz offered her a route to the healthy zone, but it is very expensive. Sam agrees to contribute his share, but only if Jenna agrees to leave the others and go with him. Alex goes to Leo's apartment, which turns out to be empty. After losing, the journalist refused to fight Lammers, but later the cop receives a pizza from a friend in which Leo left him a note with an address and a key. Caddy gets worse by the minute, and Jake prepares to say goodbye to his friend. He asks the doctor to help him put on a protective suit, and when the girl falls to the floor, the boyfriend takes her hand to ease her suffering. The doctor tells Jake that he can say goodbye to Caddy's body, which is waiting for cremation. For the first time since their acquaintance, the guy manages to touch his friend's face without gloves. Jenna tells her friends about the opportunity to leave and suggests finding the money. But Teresa refuses to go. She wants her daughter to grow up a little. Arriving at the address Leo sent him, Alex finds evidence that will help him punish Lammers. Teresa, Xander, and their newborn daughter reach Bert's house, Teresa's grandfather. The young mother plans to stay at her relative's house until the end of quarantine, but seeing the empty shelves, Xander insists that they must run. Alex learns about a certain Catherine Hops, whose son was connected with Lammers. From her, the man learns the address of the laboratory and heads there. While Dr. Connor tries to create a cure, news about him spreads throughout the zone. A gang breaks into the clinic wanting to punish the doctor, but Jake convinces them that he needs to be protected to be the first to get the vaccine. This is the last thing Jake can do before leaving. He decides to run through the cordon to save Quentin. Alex inspects the abandoned lab and finds solid evidence of Lammer's guilt. He accuses her and names a true zero patient who fell ill several years ago. This time, Lammers does not argue. She admits she created the virus and believes it is needed for the country's safety. But now she asks Alex to postpone the battle and focus on fighting the virus, which has now crossed the cordon. An attack occurs in the hospital, and one of the gangsters becomes infected. Dr. Connor has to give him the test drug. It is his only chance not to become a victim of the bandits. Jake prepares Quentin to cross into the healthy zone and promises to find him as soon as it is all over. Jenna's company also prepares to go underground to cross the cordon. At the same time, the body of the boy who tried to take the risk is examined, and an army is assembled so that no one else can cross the border. To prevent illegal crossings, the tunnels are mined and blown up. Alex tries to stop it, understanding that there may be people there, but the captain refuses to make concessions. Unaware of the government's plans, Ms. orders the fugitives to prepare to descend into the tunnel. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Dr. Connor transfuses Thomas's blood to the infected gangster, hoping this will cure him. Despite all attempts, the gangster cannot be saved. Because of this, Jake has to save the doctor. The gang leader cannot forgive him for the loss of his brother. The explosions catch the group deep in the tunnel. The ceiling begins to collapse, and the company is divided. Teresa, Xander, and their baby are left alone. Connor finds a way to make the medicine, but for this he needs people with the same blood as Thomas. Jake tries to find volunteers, but no one wants to participate in the dangerous experiment. Then the guy prepares a speech in which he names all the dead. For their sake, Jake asks people to get tested and, in case of a match, become donors. Ms. leads the group to a dead end, but the guide does not give up and looks for new exits. Alex learns about this and asks Lammers to stop the explosions and bring people to the surface. As an exception, Lammers promises the officer 1 hour. After that, all tunnels will be destroyed. Jake's words convince people and they gather to get tested. Xander takes his family to Teresa's mother's store, and the girl decides to stay there until the end. The doctor finds blood with antibodies. A local priest can be a donor for the medicine. Old man Bert spills the last bottle of wine and adds a secret ingredient to it. He and his wife raise their glasses to toast that their suffering ends. Hugging on the couch, the couple prepares to go to a better world. Alex finds the fugitives, among whom he sees Jenna. The girl assures her fiancé will let them into the clean zone, but Alex does not know what to do. His time is running out. Dr. Lammers orders the tunnels destroyed, but at this moment, Leo's report about everything the blonde did appears on the screens. Alex does not let the fugitives go, but returns to the quarantine zone with them. And Jake, scattering Caddy's ashes over the city, prepares for a new battle with the virus that changed the world. "2157. A voiceover narrates, Earth has forgotten about wars and famine. Nature has revived. Medicine has conquered deadly diseases. Humanity is exploring unknown planets, entrusting the search for extraterrestrial life in deep space to students full of strength, courage, and a belief in goodness. A young man named Max embarks on another flight. Suddenly, his spacecraft is damaged by an asteroid and makes an emergency landing on an unknown planet. Max steps outside, and immediately his shuttle explodes, leaving him without communication. But he doesn't despair, and first of all, decides to explore. By all parameters, the planet resembles Earth, and the astronaut hopes to find help and maybe a communication system here. But an indigenous inhabitant captures him in the forest. To understand the language of this planet, Max inserts a translator capsule into his ear. The indigenous person, named Zeph, turns Max over to the authorities. They put a helmet on Max that can project a person's thoughts and memories onto a screen and begin the interrogation. At the same time, in a nearby room, Corporal Gaius is assigned to transport Max to the capital as a subconvoy. Here, Max senses a strange signal, and everyone around starts chanting the anthem of the guard. Later, they pass by a strange tower, which, according to Gaius, serves to protect against enemies. Suddenly, its base explodes, and the structure collapses onto the road. Gaius is trapped inside the car, but Max pulls the corporal out. It turns out that this act was carried out by the rebels, the main enemies of the supreme authority of the state. The two men reach the capital on foot. Meanwhile, the head of the Department of Special Research, known as the Wanderer, summons his subordinate named Fank and instructs him to deliver Max to the department. Fank takes Max away, while the Republic's prosecutor reports that the Wanderer has taken in a strange savage and instructs gathering all available information about it. Then it's time to activate the towers, and everyone prepares in their own way. The prosecutor enters the bathroom and clamps a special stick between his teeth. Meanwhile, Fank has a seizure, and while soldiers assist him, Max manages to escape from the vehicle. The shocked young man walks through the city, marveling at the unfamiliar and incomprehensible life. Meanwhile, the unknown fathers gather for a meeting, as they call the rulers of this planet. After a long walk, Max enters a local cafe where he stands up for a waitress who was insulted by one of the patrons. The grateful girl introduces herself as Rada. It turns out that she is the sister of Corporal Gaius. While escorting her home, Max gets into a brawl with a street gang and defeats them. Impressed, Rada takes him to her place. Later, Gaius returns home. Max starts asking questions about the workings of their world and quickly realizes that Rada and Gaius's minds are poisoned by propaganda and false information. Rada is convinced that their planet is hollow and there is no such thing as the sky or space. Meanwhile, Gaius educates his new friend about the political structure of their state, known as Saraksh. The unknown fathers are the saviors of the homeland who have stopped wars with the help of defense towers that protect the country from attacks. Nobody knows the unknown fathers' true identities because they are not rulers, but public servants. At Max's request, Corporal recommends him for the guard. Max demonstrates a high level of training, which surprises Gaius. The two men often argue about politics, and one day Gaius admits that neighboring states hate Saraksh because they were once a single state united by a common history. Gradually, romantic feelings develop between Max and Rada. They go for walks often and Max tells her about his home planet, Earth, and regrets that his parents believe he is dead. Soon, Max is tasked with catching rebels, whom they identify by their regular seizures reminiscent of epileptic fits. One of the rebels attacks the captain, and Max saves his life, after which the captain suddenly regrets catching them, as they are also human beings. Max reveals that he considered them something like savages. Later, Max attends interrogations and sees that the rebels are not terrorists, as the unknown fathers label them, but ordinary people with their ideals and beliefs. Max cannot come to terms with the cruelty of the interrogations and simply cannot believe that someone is paying the rebels to hate the government. Meanwhile, Fank reports to the Wanderer that he has found the savage, while Gaius and Max are summoned to the captain of the guard, who orders Max to execute the arrested rebels. Max leads the condemned to the execution site in the forest, but soon he returns to the commanding officer, drops his gear and weapons, as he has released the arrested rebels and walks away. Max begins to speak about the real and just order of the world that exists on Earth. In response, the captain shoots Max, and Gaius is ordered to write a report about the transfer. Meanwhile, the unknown fathers are discussing an attack on neighboring states. The prosecutor advocates for starting a war, and the chief father orders them to come up with a pretext, such as an attack on a tower. During this time, Max's body is recovered by the rebels. Among them is a doctor who is astonished because, according to all the rules, Max should have died. He reveals that the unknown fathers are a group of conspirators who have seized power and eliminated dissenters, thus diverting the population's attention from poverty and corruption. The towers are transmitters of special radiation that hypnotizes the impoverished people, although most of them do not notice it. The minority, which includes the rebels, experiences excruciating pain. The transmitters are activated twice a day across the country, causing people to go insane and die. Max is recognized as one of their own and taken for an operation to sabotage the tower, organized by the prosecutor through a traitor. Amid gunfire, Max makes his way to the transmitter and detonates it. However, the rebel squad perishes. Max seeks refuge in Rada's apartment, where he reveals everything he has learned about the towers. Gaius does not believe this and suggests that Max should return to his home and take Rada with him. But at that moment, the guards storm the apartment and arrest the men. Max is incarcerated in a prison, where he is recognized by the indigenous Zeph, who is also a rebel. Max tells Zeph about the tower's destruction and the loss of the rebel squad. Meanwhile, the Wanderer asks the prosecutor to hand over Max to him. The prosecutor, however, requests in return to halt the development of more precise transmitters, as he fears that his secret will be revealed since his reaction to the radiation is similar to that of the rebels, meaning he is also a dissenter. Later, Max and other death row inmates are sent to clear the southern borders of the remaining war robots. During this time, the prosecutor learns that Max is immune to the emitters. He decides to break the agreement with the Wanderer and orders Max to be brought to him. The next day, Max attempts to convey to the rebels the idea that they should not destroy the towers one by one but strike at the center where the signal originates. Zeph becomes furious and explains that the towers are not for identifying dissenters. They are active continuously, not just twice a day. The radiation from the towers robs people of their ability to think critically. However, it makes them believe everything that newspapers, radio, teachers, and preachers say. People can be made to believe anything. Only the rebels understand this, as the radiation does not hypnotize them but only inflicts agonizing pain. Zeph continues, there are mutants in the south who are also unaffected by the radiation. However, they have no dealings with humans. Just then, they hear the roar of an engine, and Zeph identifies it as a self-propelled tank, trying to kill them. Max sprints to the tank, climbs inside, and disables the automatic control system. He then informs his friends that he is heading south to find allies and destroy the towers. At the border, the military attempts to stop the tank, and among them, Max recognizes Gaius. Taking him captive, Max breaks through the barricades. On the way, Max tells Gaius about the true situation on this planet, and Gaius becomes convinced of his accuracy when, at the designated time, he is outside the tower's range and does not feel the radiation. Gaius gets angry upon realizing that he has been a puppet of the government all this time, but Max tries to calm him down and reminds him that there are 40 million people like him, and it is for them that he initiated this rebellion. During a stop, residents of the steppes, referred to as mutants, appear near the tank. They behave peacefully and offer food to the travelers. The guys proceed to the ruler of these lands, noting the poverty and destitution of the population. They are told that it is dangerous to live here after the last war, but these people are outcasts with nowhere else to go. Max suggests to their leader, the Duke, to start a rebellion against the Unknown Fathers, but the mutants are physically and morally too weak to help in the uprising. The mutants propose that the guys seek help from the Island Empire. However, to do that, they must pass through contaminated lands. So the Duke gifts them an old bomber and the guys take to the sky. During the flight, the bomber is exposed to the radiation from the towers, and Gaius becomes fanatically devoted to Max, obstructing him from piloting. Max struggles to maintain control, and the bomber collides with a tower. Gaius suddenly snaps out of his fanatic state with no recollection of what he had just done. However, their aircraft is shot down by the automated anti-aircraft defense system left over from the previous war. The downed bomber crashes into the sea, but Max and Gaius manage to escape and reach the shore. On the shore, they discover an abandoned submarine, and Max decides to go inside. At the same time, in the city, the prosecutor orders Rada to be brought to him, and his men snatch her off the street. He claims to be Max's friend and shows Rada a recording of his escape. However, she doesn't believe him and refuses to assist the prosecutor in his search for her beloved. Rada is thrown into prison. Meanwhile, Gaius, impatiently waiting for his friend, swims to the submarine where they discover evidence of horrifying experiments conducted on prisoners. The guys reach the control room and view video recordings of mass executions of Gaius's fellow countrymen by the representatives of the Island Empire, whom they were seeking help from. Gaius is horrified by the fact that these monsters could invade his country. It becomes evident that forming an alliance with the Empire is not an option. The guys return to the shore, where they are met by a coastal patrol. It turns out that a war has broken out with a neighboring state, and like most of the prisoners, they will be sent to the front. Meanwhile, the Wanderer, desiring to lure Max into his department, engineers Rada's escape. He laments how the war has disrupted all his plans and assigns Fank the task of finding and bringing Max back, confessing that he is afraid of him. At the same time, Max and Gaius are dispatched to the front, where they reunite with Zeph. Their commander turns out to be the captain of the guard, who refuses to hand over the Earthling to the arriving Fank. The guys are sent into battle on old tanks when Fank finally locates Max. However, Max refuses to leave his friends and stuns the officer, tossing him into their tank. The battle commences, but Max directs his vehicle to the other side of the battlefield. Gaius blindly obeys him, influenced by the radiation, and pulls their unconscious friends out, which the captain witnesses. Gaius offers his body as a shield when the captain prepares to execute Max for desertion, but the wounded Max gathers his last strength and kills the commander. Max mourns his friend, but upon hearing Rada's name from the now conscious Fank, agrees to cooperate with the Wanderer. After the battle ends, Max buries Gaius while listening to Fank's proposals. He will have an apartment on the Institute's premises, his car, and freedom of movement. But he will only see Rada once he proves his loyalty to the state. Meanwhile, the prosecutor heads to the Wanderer's department where he deceitfully meets with Max. He proposes that Max overthrow the Unknown Fathers by providing the coordinates of the center that controls the tower system. Upon infiltrating the center, Max must activate special radiation, causing waves of depression, which will subdue all the people in the country, including the military. Then, Max must eliminate the Unknown Fathers. Afterward, he will become the ruler of the state and free Rada, who's in the Wanderer's hands. The prosecutor will serve as his advisor. Max takes Zeph with him and embarks on the mission. He arrives at the center and issues orders to his associates, instructing them to detonate the bomb in the trunk if he does not return. He easily gains access to the interior, but is halted by guards just before reaching the elevator. Max incapacitates them, but the men regain consciousness and pursue him. Max reaches the control center and activates the depression mode throughout the country. The Wanderer watches as people fall to the ground and rushes toward the control center. Meanwhile, Max returns to retrieve the bomb, places it inside the building, and triggers it. Then, he leaves the site of the impending explosion. The Wanderer initiates a pursuit of Max and, catching up with him, engages in a confrontation. At that moment, a powerful explosion resounds, destroying the main transmitter. People on the streets begin to regain their senses and sobriety as Max rushes to find Rada and locates her in a cryo chamber. He carries the girl outside, but the Wanderer blocks his path. It is then revealed that he is, in fact, an employee of Galactic Security from Earth who arrived on the planet 20 years ago to assist it. Now, chaos erupts on the streets, leading to a power struggle in which many people will perish. In his rage, the Wanderer beats up a foolish student who destroyed the fruits of his labor. Forgetting about economics and inflation, the state faces famine and invasion from neighboring countries. Max starts to resist and, in turn, accuses the Wanderer of allowing the construction of the towers and the enslavement of the local population. However, the Wanderer reminds him of the laws of history, where all rational beings go through the experience of wars and enslavement. This planet is no exception. It is at this point that Max declares that he is now home. As long as he is alive, he will fight against inflation, hunger, and wars, and will not allow the establishment of yet another society based on slavery. Rada comes to Max, and as they stand together, the Wanderer smiles.
One day, an 11th grader named Nikolai comes to school and immediately gets into trouble with his classmate Victor. Victor is upset about an unflattering comment about their mutual love interest, Nastya, appearing on the board. Victor drags Kolya to the classroom, but Kolya tells everyone that this is nothing compared to what awaits them in the future. After all, an alien spaceship is already on its way to Earth. However, the pilot made a mistake and arrived in the wrong place, accidentally catching the signal of Kolya's best friend and avid gamer, Fima. Thanks to this mistake, Earth will soon join the Star Federation, which will immediately accelerate progress in all areas of knowledge and medicine. But in 2110, military conflicts will begin with the Cosmic Pirate Alliance, led by Glot, who can travel through time. Humans had a tough time until a special squad led by Kira was sent into battle. She will reach Glot and sacrifice herself to destroy him. Kira will leave behind a daughter, Alice, who will study at the same school as Kolya, but 100 years in the future. However, Alice finds studying completely uninteresting. Some of her classmates of alien origin pay attention to her and offer friendship, but the girl's mind is occupied with entirely different thoughts. On this day, she returns from school, greets the robot Werther, and shows off new bracelets that allow for creating combat simulations. Werther immediately helps her pass a level, fighting 3 space pirates at once. At the most inopportune moment, her father, Professor Seleznev, appears in the simulation and gets hit in the nose. Alice immediately stops the fight and helps the injured. Here, the father notices the bracelet, which turns out to be sent from the military academy named after her mother, where she applied for admission. The man is outraged by her decision, but Alice reminds him that after the battle, her mother's body was never found, so she could very well be somewhere in the past. Alice takes her father to the tree growing in the middle of his bio-laboratory. An unmistakable heart silhouette, 100 years old, is visible on the bark. Could this be a message from her mother? Moreover, the robot has already found a similar woman in the past, a physics teacher from Moscow named Margarita. Coincidentally, she turns out to be Kolya's teacher, and in her time, she is rushing to the classroom where the boys are sorting things out. Understanding the situation, the teacher stops the fight. Kolya gets a reprimand and is ordered to erase the nasty comment he wrote on the board. Kolya and Fima go to the classroom, but the permanent marker doesn't come off, and Kolya decides to find a more effective solution in the lab. He breaks the doors, climbs to the top shelf where some vials are stored, and drops a water-filled lens, but it falls to the floor in a kind of slow motion. Kolya tries to find an explanation for this effect. Examining the wall, he finds a hidden safe, from which he takes out a box containing something strange, resembling a small galaxy. Suddenly, this object gets absorbed into Kolya's palm and he starts to convulse, while a voice whispers to him that the Cosmian has reappeared in the system. Terrified, Kolya runs into the corridor, and then outside. But the schoolyard around is completely different. There are many aliens around the school. Eventually, Kolya bumps into Alice, who, without understanding, performs a move and throws the boy to the ground. He sees the girl and is at a loss for words. Then he complains of feeling unwell, causing the girl to laugh. Is his biodata chip not working? Kolya doesn't understand her sarcasm and asks to call an ambulance. Alice then realizes that something is wrong with the boy. Besides, he is dressed very strangely. Kolya shows his pass, a badge, and the girl asks him to look around. Realizing that this is the future, the boy loses consciousness. Meanwhile, in a space prison, a pirate named Jolly, because he is always laughing, escapes from his cell, comes to the cell of the space pirate Glot, and admits that he has been recognized as the captain of the Alliance. But Glot reminds him that without the Cosmian, they won't be able to conquer even the most underdeveloped planet. He can feel its waves and can find it. Jolly agrees to cooperate and frees Glot. Glot uses his mental powers to force the guards to self-destruct, and the pirates escape. Meanwhile, Kolya regains consciousness and is frightened by the robot Werther. Alice confirms that it is the year 2124. She shows him a view of a futuristic city with blooming sakura and white bridges. The temperature is now controlled by humans. Machines are used as needed. The meat they eat is artificial. At this time, Professor Seleznev comes to the laboratory. Learning that the boy somehow traveled from the past, he begins the analysis and finds that Kolya's body contains a cluster of exotic matter with variable gravity, what they call the Cosmian. Kolya explains where and how he found this object. Learning that his physics teacher is named Margarita, Alice immediately understands that this is her mother. After this news, the father shows Alice a letter. In it, the missing wife explains that because of the Cosmian, she ended up in 2014. The problem is that with its help, one can only move exactly 100 years. Kira changed her details and hid securely so that the pirates wouldn't find her. She asks her daughter to look after her father, and she will always be proud of her. Alice runs out of the room in tears. Kolya rushes after her. Alice, sitting under the tree, tells her virtual father everything she thinks about him. Werther leads Kolya to this place and explains that meeting oneself in another time leads to a continuum failure. And then the space pirates appear. Glot captures Kolya with his mental power, but Werther manages to activate the alarm signal. Glot reports that they can't take the Cosmian while the boy is alive, and the pirate Jolly prepares his weapon. But Alice rushes into the fight, using bionic arms. The professor appears, trying to stop the fight. However, Kolya, obeying Glot's mental power, shoots the professor. An energy release occurs, and reality begins to change. Alice, Kolya, and the pirates find themselves in the middle of a highway in 2024. Alice and Kolya run away, and Jolly chases them, jumping on cars. Werther helps the kids, and when the pirate catches up with the pair and stabs Alice with a sword, it turns out to be her hologram. Then the pirate cuts the robot in half. Angry, he complains to Glot, but Glot takes control of a motorcyclist and knocks his partner down. However, Jolly gets up and finds Kolya's pass card on the road. Now he knows which school he attends and plans to do without Glot. Meanwhile, Kolya and Alice ride away from this place by subway. Kolya takes the girl to his home. He explains to his mother that Alice lost her keys and cannot stay outside, and she allows the girl to stay overnight. At night, Kolya admits that he writes texts and performs rap dedicated to Alice. This makes an impression on her. Meanwhile, Jolly tries to get to the school, but taxi drivers take him for a lunatic. So Jolly grabs a smartphone with a mapped route from one of the taxi drivers and heads to the place on foot. And physics teacher Kira sees a news report about the incident on the road and recognizes the pirate Jolly. The next morning, Kolya brings Alice to school, where Nastya mistakes her for his new girlfriend and starts to harass the couple, not letting them pass. Then Kolya sees his physics teacher Kira, catches up with her, and starts telling her what happened. But the woman notices Fima and is puzzled because he should be at Kolya's apartment playing. The conversation is interrupted by the appearance of Jolly, who, seeing Kira, proposes to settle the matter peacefully. But the woman engages in a fight. The pair wreck everything around, and eventually, Kira ends up in the physics classroom, where Alice, Kolya, Fima, Nastya, and her new boyfriend Victor are hiding. They barricade themselves inside, Jolly breaks in, and Alice asks Kolya to take them to the future. But to activate the Cosmian, strong emotions need to be evoked in Kolya. And when the pirate breaks through the wall, Alice kisses Kolya. Temporal vortices start immediately. Taking advantage of the pirate's confusion, Kira cuts off his arm. The whole team is transported to the future. However, it is not at all a wonderful place. The school is destroyed and battle robots are flying outside. Kira hits one of them with a sword and its outer mask falls off, revealing the robot assistant Werther underneath. He explains why the world has changed. It turns out that in the original story, Fima, on the day of Kolya's first transfer to the future, went to his apartment to play in a gaming tournament and accidentally received the signal from the lost alien courier, which led Earth to join the Star Federation. But in the new reality, Glot, who ended up in the past, directed Fima to school instead of the tournament and took the signal himself. Earth turned into a Pirate Alliance outpost, enslaving humanity and forcing them to work for a bowl of soup. Werther leads the team to Jolly, who has hardly aged over 100 years. It turns out that he was the one who saved Werther, disguising him as a pirate bot. Kira doesn't believe the pirate, but he convinces the team that he is now on their side. And all these years, he has been craving revenge on Glot for betraying him, although by the oath, he cannot harm him personally. If they destroy Glot, everything will return to normal. 100 years ago, Fima received the signal. So they need to go to Kolya's apartment and stop Glot in the past. Kira, Kostya, and Jolly head to Kolya's apartment to thwart Glot's plan. Meanwhile, Fima suddenly wonders why Glot didn't track their move. The friends conclude that it is a trap, and indeed, they fall into a pirate ambush. Their friends rush to their rescue, and Victor destroys the attackers with a bomb found on Jolly. But it also collapses a huge building on the street. Frightened Kolya tries to save his friends and moves them to the past, to their time. But he returns to the future, where a fierce battle with the surviving pirates is underway. Jolly locks Kira in a room, taking the blows on himself and receiving a fatal wound. Glot appears, happy to announce that he is now free from the oath. He waits for his former comrade to die. In the past, Kolya's friends run to his apartment where they find Glot. In the future, Kolya, Kira, and Alice also arrive at Kolya's apartment. He tries to move to the future, causing the realities to fluctuate, merging and diverging. In the past, friends beat each other on Glot's orders. And in the future, also under Glot's influence, Alice starts to strangle Kolya. She tries to resist Glot's mental command, but she can't. Kolya dies. Glot of the future receives the Cosmian. Alice, freed from his influence, rushes to revive Kolya, but it's all in vain. But when the girl starts crying over him, he suddenly opens his eyes. At this time, Glot absorbs the Cosmian. Alice tells him that her mother is still alive and she can defeat him again. But he reminds her that 100 years ago, in this apartment, he killed Kira and Kolya's friends. Kolya disputes with Glot, claiming that in the past, his friends can still defeat the pirate. Angered, Glot offers him to see it for himself and moves them to 100 years ago in the past. But when Glot, Alice, and Kolya arrive in 2024, the future Glot meets the past Glot, causing a continuum failure, making Glot multiply first and then disappear. This was Kolya's plan. The unclaimed Cosmian begins to work on its own until Kolya reaches for it. However, the resulting anomaly throws Alice and Kira into 2124. Kolya ends up in an intertemporal space, from where he is thrown into his 2024. He wakes up in a hospital, where the jubilant Fima reports that he managed to receive the signal from the alien courier, and this restored history to its original course. Kolya realizes that the Cosmian inside him is gone, and now he can no longer travel through time, and he will never see Alice again. Meanwhile, Alice and Kira find themselves at their home and see their husband and father alive and well. It turns out Kolya wrote him a warning letter that was delivered 100 years later, and he managed to substitute his hologram under the pirate's shot. Later, Kolya and his friends plant a tree as a symbol of caring for the future. Kolya draws a heart on the tree, and Alice receives this message in the future, understanding that the boy remembers her. This is where the movie ends.
Czech astrophysicist Jakub wakes up in his ship thousands of miles from Earth. His day starts with a call from the flight curator and close friend Peter. Today, the people of Earth want to communicate with the hero. The head of the Czech space program, Tuma, greets the brave pilot as he has been on a solo flight for 189 days already. The thing is, for 4 years, a mysterious cosmic phenomenon, which has been named Chopra's cloud, has been observed from Earth. To study its origin and composition, Jakub was sent to Jupiter. In just a few days, he will be able to take samples, which may help unravel the mysteries of the universe. The captain is asked questions, and suddenly a girl sympathizes with him, as he is the loneliest person in the universe. But Jakub assures her that it is not so. Yes, he is 500 million kilometers away from Earth, but nearly half the distance has been covered, and he will soon return home. Moreover, his beloved wife Lenka constantly supports him, with whom he is in direct contact through the latest quantum communication system, which is faster than the speed of light. So Jakub does not suffer from loneliness. TV takes a commercial break where a cheerful Jakub praises the products of a generous sponsor. But the astronaut immediately frowns, and it becomes clear that he is a tired man who has not slept for a long time. Meanwhile, on Earth, Lenka records a message to her husband, apologizing for leaving him because she is not needed by him. But the flight curator stops the file from being sent and passes it to Tuma. On the ship, Jakub repairs the toilet again, grumbling at Peter, but the latter is more concerned about the malfunctioning cameras. He also notices the astronaut's tired look and advises him to get some sleep. Jakub asks to contact Lenka because she somehow does not respond to his calls, and he promises to find out the reason. The man begins training when Tuma reviews his wife's message. The woman sincerely worries for the family and does not intend to pass this message to Jakub. Lenka is packing her things at this time and does not respond to her husband's messages. Distressed, Jakub drowns his sorrows in sweets and tries to sleep, watching the approaching Chopra's cloud. At night, noises from the malfunctioning toilet keep him from sleeping. He gets up unrested and even more tired, and looking at himself in the mirror, suddenly notices strange movement under his skin and tentacles protrude from his mouth. Jakub is horrified, trying to pull something out of himself, and wakes up. He starts the day on the treadmill, then prepares to equip the apparatus for sample collection. Half of the ship's cameras are out of order, and no one understands why. The thought of Lenka, who still does not make contact, disturbs him. And one day Jakub suddenly hears an unfamiliar voice offering help, but Peter hears nothing of the sort. True, there is a chance that Jakub intercepted the transmission of the Korean mission, which started after the Czech one, but the language was not Korean at all. Later, the friend informs that Lenka went to her mother's, so she will contact her husband when she returns. Jakub calms down a bit and continues his work. He inspects the compartments and suddenly sees a huge hairy spider in one of them. He closes the doors to the compartment and contacts Peter. But precisely in this part of the station, the camera has long been broken and he can see nothing. Jakub opens the doors, but the spider has not gone anywhere. Moreover, it starts a conversation, stating that it did not intend to scare the human. Then the astronaut locks himself in the airlock and informs Peter that he wants to decontaminate the ship. He gets into a spacesuit, says the password that triggers the system, and the surrounding space is filled with disinfecting foam, the color of which reminds him of a summer morning in the field where he and Lenka walked. But then the cleaning is over and Jakub emerges from the airlock. However, the spider hasn't gone anywhere. It informs him that the strange bath arranged for it by the human did not harm it and suggests removing the spacesuit. It is not dangerous. Jakub reaches out to it, but the spider dodges. Such is not the custom in its tribe, so it's better for the human not to do this. It is an explorer too who accidentally found Earth. It studied life on the planet for 3,158 years and even learned Earth's languages, but never understood the essence of the human soul. And when it met Jakub, it felt his loneliness and came here. Unable to accept what was happening, the astronaut hides in the sleeping compartment, but he immediately starts to vividly see and hear his wife. Jakob moves to the station's room, where Lenka appears before him again. It turns out the spider is broadcasting the human's memories because it is very interested in these strange feelings. And it wants to help him overcome emotional difficulties since his companion is leaving. Jakob tries to refuse the help, but the spider does not believe him. Meanwhile, on Earth, Lenka arrives at her mother's because she is pregnant and cannot be alone. Nearby is a boarding house where pregnant women live together, and she decides to stay there for a while. The mother does not understand her, as one cannot leave her husband right now. At the station, the spider asks the astronaut to give it some of his food, and he treats it to nut paste, the taste of which reminds it of its lost home. Its planet was destroyed by an enemy attack, and it fled and wandered through space for a long time. At this time on Earth, Tuma goes to Lenka. The woman is convinced that the wife cannot leave her husband right now. After all, she knew he was a very peculiar person. These qualities help him stay alone for many days, but Lenka is pregnant and suffers from loneliness. The spider tells the astronaut that Chopra's cloud consists of particles that contain wisdom. It cannot say how old it is, but everything has a beginning and an end, even the universe. The spider shows Jakob his first date with Lenka when she suggested they always follow each other, and he agreed. And he does not understand why make promises that you cannot keep, but Jakob has no answer. Later, he asks the spider to save some nut paste, and it reluctantly gives back the can. At this time on Earth, Lenka confesses to her mother that, although it is hard to raise a child alone, she is ready for it. And she will tell her daughter that she loved her father very much at first, but was mistaken. And at the station, Jakob suddenly wonders about the spider's name and suggests naming the creature Hanus. His father told him about a master who lived in ancient times, who created astronomical clocks, for which the king ordered him to be blinded. The spider agrees to accept this name. Later, the astronaut plays music from the opera Mermaid and explains what it is. The spider immediately demonstrates his date with his wife when she appeared before him in a Naiad costume, but the man does not want to remember this. At night, Jakob again has nightmares, this time related to his father, who was a communist and died because of his beliefs. But the spider comforts its friend. There is no need to worry about the past, as the universe is as it should be. Later, Hannes watches in surprise as Jakob exercises, and Jakob explains that humans must do this in space, otherwise their limbs could fail. Hanus doesn't understand why leave the home planet then. At this time, Tuma visits Lenka. The woman tries to reach out to the wife's feelings, but she does not want to return to the past. Then the head says she will not pass her message, and the whole point of the silence surrounding their talks is that inside they are together. Meanwhile, there are only 45 hours left to reach the cloud. And then Lenka's voice spreads through the station. Jakob rushes to the transmitter and sees his wife's face on the screen. They talk about the past and the future when he sees a glowing particle in front of him, which Hannes calls the beginning. Jakob tries to catch it in a jar, but the particle freely passes through all surfaces. Suddenly, the ship loses all communication, and then Chopra's particles start swirling everywhere. Hannes calms the human. The beginning will not harm him, so there is no need to fear. It is a regular repository that cannot be described in human language. And then it asks why the arrival of a child so upsets Lenka. Because her feelings smell of fear. Jakob explains that they lost their first child, and he was not there then, nor now. For what? The spider shows Jakob their conversation when he promised to be there, but he lied to his wife, and she stopped believing him. Later, Jakob finally gets through to Peter on the quantum phone, but Hannes again turns on the man's memories, where he and his wife discuss his journey. He was so confident that he didn't even try to understand his wife. The spider realized that Jakob is selfish, and he is to blame for his loneliness. So it lost interest in him and wants to leave. This causes a panic attack in the astronaut, who no longer wants to be alone. Jakob tries to grab the spider, but it itself presses the man's body to the bulkhead and reminds him that it preferred to communicate without touching. The spider lets the human go and flies to the other end of the station. Jakob desperately follows it, promising to change, and again sees Lenka in the guise of a naiad. He floats in zero gravity, remembering his wife and crying from the sense of realizing the loss. Then he calls Peter and asks him to visit the woman. The friend goes to the boarding house and hands her the quantum phone. Jakob talks about how he loves her and asks for forgiveness for his selfishness. Now he doesn't understand why he neglected the most precious. He wasted his life on nonsense and is not worthy of her. Immediately after the conversation, he hears Hanus's voice again, asking him to rest because he has atoned for his guilt. Jakob asks not to leave him, and the spider admits that it too fears loneliness. But suddenly the man notices that the spider is not feeling well, and it admits that although it escaped from the enemy, it was already too late. They had taken over his body, and suddenly it hugs the astronaut. For the first time in a long time, Jakob falls asleep deeply, and the spider has to wake him up because a great discovery awaits him. It even brings him a tube of hot coffee to bed, after which the astronaut makes the final preparations. He contacts the Czech Space Authority and reports that his mission is dedicated to all the people of Earth, but especially to Lenka. Afterward, he reduces speed and begins collecting samples using special equipment. But then the spider becomes very ill. Jakob abandons his task and tries to help his friend. The equipment gives an error, and Earth commands to cancel the sample collection. But Jakob hears nothing because he sees Hanus in open space. The ship's systems fail one after another, and the control center orders to end the mission and return. But Jakob puts on a spacesuit, takes a bomb, and goes outside. Peter can't understand what's happening and pleads with his friend to return to the ship. However, using the explosion to catch up with the spider, Jakob holds it. Hanus thanks him, but it's all in vain. Soon the enemies will consume him, and Jakob, looking at the surrounding space, remembers the day he almost drowned. Then his father saved him, and now he forgives all his father's sins, and forgives himself. Hanus pulls him to the center of the cloud, where everything is gathered, the beginning and the end, the fluctuation of all times, his past and future, him, his Lenka, and his father. Every promise and punishment, everything is unchangeable and impermanent, but such is the truth of nature. The universe is as it should be. Before the man, Lenka appears again, and Jakob admits that their meeting is a miracle. Just like the meeting with the spider. Jakob hands his friend a can of nut paste he saved for him. The latter thanks him and asks to listen to the silence, after which it disintegrates into millions of particles, consumed by worm-like creatures that destroyed his race. And Lenka on Earth suddenly sees a glowing purple particle in the grass. Night turns into day. Jakob in a spacesuit wades through a transparent stream, above which, on a log, sits Lenka in a mermaid costume asking him to kiss her. Her face becomes the last thing he sees, at least for a moment, because at that time, he sees the lights of a South Korean ship which saves Jakob. Later he calls his wife Lenka, apologizes, and confesses that if he had known everything earlier, he would never have left, and she would kiss him once more. A fantastic, yet lifelike film. A work-absorbed astronaut had to be millions of kilometers away from his wife and hear a sermon from an extraterrestrial being to understand that family is the most important thing in his life, and one can only hope that he will manage to regain his sense of purpose.